I'd like to call to order the Whatcom County Council meeting for February 13th, 2018. I'd like to start with a roll call.
Tim Ballou.
Here.
Barbara Brenner.
Here.
Rudd Brown.
Here.
Barry Buchanan.
Here.
Tyler Bird.
Here.
Todd Donovan.
Present.
Satpal Sidhu.
Here.
All present and accounted for. If you'd like to join me for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to ask, just remind everybody, please turn off your cell phones. If you're handing out paperwork to the council, please make sure that you give one copy to the county clerk, or the council clerk, which is down on the end here. And the first order of business is, so we're going to have a couple of public hearings, and in the public hearings, audience members who signed up at the back of the room prior to the beginning of our meeting will be called first and are asked to form a line behind the signs at either side of the chambers. If you're unable to sign up before the meeting, you'll be given an opportunity to address the council once we've gotten through all the folks listed on the hearing sheets. Thank you. Each speaker should state his or her name for the record and will be given 3 minutes to address the council. Council staff will keep track of the time limits and will let you know when you have 30 seconds left to wrap up your comments. When a large group of individuals supports the same position on an issue, we encourage the selection of 1 or 2 representatives to speak on behalf of the entire group. And for the public hearing, we're going to run a concurrent public hearing for 2 ordinances. This is, number 1 is an ordinance interim repealing Ordinance 2017-057 and adopting amendments to the Whatcom County Comprehensive Plan and Whatcom County Code Title 15, Buildings and Construction, Title 20, Zoning, Title 21, Land Division Regulations, and Title 24, Health Code related to water resources, AB 2018-057A. And the next thing is Emergency Ordinance Interim 2018-001, repealing Ordinance 2017-057 and adopting amendments to the Whatcom County Comprehensive Plan and the Whatcom County Code Title 15, Buildings and Construction, Title 20, Zoning, Title 21, Land Division Regulations, Title 24, Health Code relating to water resources, AB 2018-057. This is a procedural hearing. The ordinance itself was adopted on January 30th, 2018. So the first person I've got signed up is Paul Isaacson. And if there's anybody else who wishes to speak after him, please step up behind the signs and near the podiums.
My name is Paul Isaacson. As many of you know, I'm the representative for the Whatcom Well Caucus and on the Planning Committee, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of myself as a citizen. And I've submitted to you a couple of different pieces of information for your consideration. One of them is, and I'd like to read one of them out loud, and I'm going to skip right to page number 2. On this morning, Councilmember Brenner comment. Councilmember Brenner, as well as Councilmember Brown, showed concern for cost, hookup, and availability of water to landowners in a potential or actual district. And I want you to know my rebuttal. There are several things to consider here. One example is on January 22nd, the Bellingham Council received a request from Water District 7 for a water hookup approval. You can see it on YouTube. So the applicant did not need to drill a well. They denied the applicant water based upon the fact that they did not want to serve anyone that is clearly delineated even though they were clearly delineated in the district. because of their policy. They will not serve in the watershed. However, that does not stop the development or construction. It just forces a well. In light of having the infrastructure located in the district, available hookups, and DOE approval, they created a different agenda. They're using water as an extortionist tool in several areas. I would encourage this council to consult with the City of Bellingham to understand the following. One, they are large conveyors of water via Lake Whatcom to household and others. Two, they then have a vast majority of this water transported via the sewer district to a treatment facility. Three, then the water is dumped into the bay without regards or return to its origin, therefore being one of the largest creek or stream removals in the entire county. Four, they remove water upstream, they dump it downstream, therefore being the largest consumptive user in the entire county. Domestic home wells draw, use, and maintain water and treat in a vast majority of systems on one site. It's returned to the aquifer or the surface water, then utilized by fish, wildlife, and the vast ecosystems that are supported. There's a small percentage that becomes consumptive, making domestic wells the most environmentally sound option to our ecosystems. Without significant conveyance, as sewer systems, evaporation, industrial, or commercial waste can represent. Storage is not always the answer, as this can create a man-made ecosystem that are not always friendly to the pre-existing environments. The natural deep aquifers in our regions appear to be more than adequate if managed
30
reasonably.
seconds, please.
I encourage all to review the users and see what we can really gain through technology's advancement, drip irrigation, and better known practices and the like. We're about to receive mitigation funding through the state. Where do we really want to spend it? On a group that uses 0.7% of the water? The consumptive percentage is much lower than that, as you can see. The information, the pie chart that I gave you is direct from the Department of Ecology. So I want you to really look at that and think about where we're going to spend our money. Thank you.
Mr. Byrd.
Paul, excuse me, may I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm just curious, in your comment in the statement, Mr. Brown and Mrs. Brenner's concern today was about forcing landowners that were, say, half a mile outside of the area to be required to hook up versus being allowed to use an exempt well. So are you for requiring them to hook up?
So if you look, no. Yes and no. If you look at my last page in my last paragraph, you will see a very clear example that is used dramatically on the East Coast that answers specifically Councilmember Brown's question. I don't, and I have not advocated a particular percentage, but I did outline it for fairness county-wide. So I would encourage you to read that last statement, because I want to close with this. A half a mile of distance on Chuckanut Mountain up a hill could be $500,000. A half a mile in Linden in the middle of a field on an easement is obviously far cheaper. So distance has no bearing on the fact of whether one should hook up or not.
Okay, so you're proposing an alternative which would be cost-based as it is in relation to the cost of the property or overall value of the property.
Correct, and that may be 2%, maybe 20%. I don't know what it would be. That would be up for a council to make that decision.
Okay.
But obviously the hookup fee on a lot that's a $10,000 or $20,000 lot versus maybe a commercial use that they're gonna forge ahead on a $3 million lot, one would afford a hookup far more than another one might be able to.
Perfect sense. Thank you very much. I think it's a great
That's just my
alternative.
suggestion in my last paragraph.
Thank you.
So is there anybody else who wishes to speak on either of these two ordinances? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And do we have a staff report on this issue? No staff report. Okay, so we've closed the public hearing. We've had the staff report. Is there a motion to approve number one, which is the interim ordinance?
I move to approve the interim ordinance.
I second.
Mr. Byrd moves, Ms. Brenner seconds. Is there any discussion? Mr. Donald?
Yeah, I will again point out why I can't support this. But first, by prefacing it that, and I think I said before, I think the staff has done a really good job getting us into a better policy than we were before the Hearst thing came down, but I don't think we're really planning long-term here. I know that 6091 was a bill that put this in an emergency situation, which means we don't have to do an EIS technically, we don't have to do an EIS, and we can easily just say that's not going to be significant. But I think that's important information that we should have. In terms of the quantity issues, because this whole issue is about water quantity shortages in times of the year in certain basins where water might be absent. We're assuming, and this came up in our daytime hearing, that we're granting people 3,000 gallons a day on average, but we're going to make these sort of assumptions that they're only using 3,000 gallons a day. I don't think we've really thought that through. But maybe the bigger thing, and I'm just trying to get people to think long-term here, is, you know, we're going to set up this process, we're going to be doing mitigation, we're expecting money from the state. I never hold my breath for like what money we're going to get from the state for 15 years from now. So all these mitigation projects that we're going to have to do, that's sort of up in the air. And I also worry that, you know, the way this is set up, we're going to create a couple of different classes of water users. People who are right now are going to be able to get in, I think the way this is written, to use 3,000 gallons a day. And then when we get the process complete, hopefully within a year, and we come up with out of the conservation and mitigation standards, people can get permits that might say they only can use 300 gallons a day, or there's summer restrictions or outdoor use restrictions on them. And yeah, I think we really have not thought all this stuff through. And as far as we keep hearing about dumping stuff into the bay, you know, water actually does end up in the bay, and that's actually a good thing. But I kind of appreciate some of the stuff Mr. Isaacson said about, you know, the pie chart here, that the bigger issue is irrigation. And if we can't kind of think forward in terms of conservation and mitigation right now about these wells that really don't use that much water, what do you call it, the 800-pound gorilla or the elephant in the room or whatever is that big piece of the pie chart of most, if not most of that water is being used illegally. We know that. And you know, it's sort of, you know, so we can kind of pretend about this stuff with these domestic wells, and it's not that much, but yeah, you know, we're not granting people rights. They don't have right to the water, so it's state-owned water. But I really appreciate that chart, because like that's what we're kind of ignoring, and that we're dealing with the easy thing here right now, and I don't think we're really dealing with it thinking long term. So anyway, but I said that, you know, I appreciate what's in the ordinance. There's a lot I like in the ordinance. I think we've done a pretty good job on that, and I'm voting against it, just I guess to kind of draw attention to, we got a lot of work to do. So.
Ms. Brenner.
Well, in case Councilmember Donovan hasn't noticed, we already have a whole bunch of different classes of water users and people who can and can't have water. And to say that this is going to create two different classes is, I don't think it's even correct. But it certainly doesn't take into consideration what a whole lot of people are going through. And we got an email today, a letter about, oh, well, this isn't an emergency. It's only about an investment thing. I can't imagine what would happen with me. I can imagine, but I won't even say it on, you know, on the microphone. If somebody tried to take away my ability to use my water, and this is life and death for some people, and it's also, you know, you talk about investment. Well, we invest in all kinds of things. Does that make us evil investors, or does that make us concerned people? We invest in our children. We invest in people we care about. And to even say that this isn't an emergency, it's not an emergency for anybody except those who are not able to get water. And it is a real emergency then. And I'm not talking about you and that. It was this email we got today that really burned me up. I just feel like you're like you said, this is such a minor thing in the whole water issue. And if we can't even, you know, give people some comfort and some resolution of this on this very small issue, I think we're going to be lost on all the other issues. And I know we're not talking about ag, but I do have to say agriculture does give back big time to this community. So I did want to say that part. And the thing about dumping it into the bay, that is not the same. To take it out of the Lake Whatcom watershed, the Middle Fork, use it, and then dump it into the bay is certainly not the same as that water going all its flow all the way down to the mouth of the Nooksack. It's totally different. And if it's left on its own, it can serve a whole lot of people, the environment, and all kinds of things. But if it's taken from one area and just processed into the bay, that isn't the same. So I just feel like let's just at least do this one little thing. And I don't believe in the scheme of anything, it's even significant in any way, except to those who need it. So I hope you vote yes.
Mr. Donovan.
Ms. Brenner was correct, she corrected she was talking about an email, not myself.
It wasn't about you.
But the part about that, I think the part about me not taking into consideration the situation people are in, I think.
I didn't mean,
Okay,
I was
think you know
mixing
that,
them up, sorry about that.
But I'm just, I want us to think longer term here, and we should be having discussions in committees about what water needs to get in the bay and what water doesn't need to get in the bay. And we've tried proposing alternatives to this a year ago, and that didn't go anywhere. And this has been, I don't know, we spent about 38 minutes discussing it. And I think, I just want to keep the ball rolling, so I'm going to vote no.
You already said that.
Any further discussion, Mr. Blue?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to Mr. Isaacson for providing a comment on the record, and also want to acknowledge the long line of folks who provided testimony at the last meeting on the emergency ordinance. And I also want to say, I think that both of my colleagues here are right, that this has created an emergency for water users in the county, but I also think that the vote on this, agreeing with Todd's comments, the vote on this isn't going to really change the bigger problem, and that's water certainty for the entire watershed, for all of the water users. I got to hear from Mr. Isaacson at the planning unit, and I think that's where I think that the comments of looking at the larger problems and finding solutions for these to make sure that there's in-stream flow all the way through the Nooksack River for fish habitat, for consumptive and non-consumptive uses, that discussion is very much needed. And I think that a lot of the energy that's been displayed over this next year, because I know that we only have to come up with solutions to mitigating the impacts from the exempt wells, but I think if the same energy could be put towards solving the larger problem, we'll all be better off. Again, I mentioned it earlier today, this morning in the work session. I strongly urge the administration to advocate for the mitigation dollars sooner than later. I understand that they're statewide, which means that it's not guaranteed to go to any particular watershed. That means the county needs to do its job to advocate for the resources that our community needs. So we need that help just as much as I needed your help developing these ordinances. But again, thanking everyone who got it this far, and I think that it's our obligation to comply with state law.
Mr. Sadhu.
I think, I have stated before and even again today that I'm in favor of getting people exempt well permits and get going with their life. That's not really an issue we are discussing. And we already have 2 classes of exempt wells as of today or as of tomorrow. There are people with exempt wells. They can draw 5,000 gallons, There are people with exempt wells, they can draw only 3,000 gallons. So talking about classes of use, we already created two. The other part is that, like Mr. Ballou said, that, you know, we are looking at perspective of the whole water issue, which planning unit have been trying for 15 years. When we look at only exempt well issue, yes, like I said, 2% of the problem consumed 98% of the energy. And now 98% of the problem is remaining, and how much energy we have left as community to put into that, that's what is important. Now, I just want to give an answer to Mr. Isaacson that if we are, example is on the second or third paragraph, that if we have a guide meridian and everybody wants to use the guide meridian at the same time, and then we need 10 lanes going and 10 lanes up. Yes, but I differ with that scenario. The scenario is if we want to build a guide and we go ask people, all the people who live guide or who will travel on the guide, how many trips you're going to make? They will say, oh, normally I'll make 2 trips a day. Everybody says 2 trips a day, and you calculate and you build a guide. And then suddenly say, but I have right to make 100 trips because in my permitting things that you can do 100 trips. And suddenly, where are we going to have that resource? So water, when you take water for one use, you're taking it away from some other use. If we want to use consumptive water, then we should be bold enough to agree that I use only 300 gallons in a day, and out of 300 gallons, I put back 250 gallons back into the water. Yes, you should be bold enough to say, yes, that's what my consumption is. But if I need another 2,000 gallons or 500 gallons a day, only 10% of the people, they should be allowed to use it. But when we come to the side of my right, then we say, I have a right to take 5,000 gallons. But when we say, oh, I want to calculate how much water reserve I should leave for these people because they have a right to draw. If I have a well and I have 5,000 gallons, I'm not going to call and make a phone call, should I pump or not? I'm going to go pump it. So I think we should be talking about how to solve the bigger problem. I don't have a qualm with 3,000 gallons or 5,000 gallons. It could be 10,000 gallons. That's not the issue. The issue is that if we allocate our water, especially on the 4 months of the year, when we have water shortage, and if everybody has a right, then you can't assume he has a right, but he's not going to use it. We should be bold enough to say, yes, I use it, but I want my ability that if I need more water than that, I should be allowed to. And maybe 10% of the people who need that water, and they should be given that water. There should be a process for that. So we need some kind of compromise, some kind of system where we meet the needs of people who need more than 250 gallons a day. But we cannot have fuzzy math on both sides, say I use only 250 gallons a day and show my pie chart, but when I look at my rights, my pie chart is like half of this. So I think that is something I beg to differ with you, and but we should have some common ground, and that's where the water bank or other ideas can be at play, and we should look at what about the farmers? What about if everybody says, give me my right? Then we don't even have a solution. What are we compromising about? So that's my point. Okay, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Mr. Bird and then Ms. Brenner.
So I like what Mr. Setpal said about looking at the whole water issue. And it's part of what really frustrates me about this whole entire topic. And the best I could do is go back and talk about kind of the last surface water meeting that we had, in which we talked about spending millions of dollars on how we can get as much of the water out of the Nooksack and into the ocean as quickly as possible to mitigate for flooding on one hand. And then on the other hand, we talked about how we don't have enough water for the individuals and the exempt wells and irrigation. And to me, the fact that we continue to look at both of these issues as two entirely separate issues is just unreal. I can't possibly understand how we continue to do this and continue to consider these as two different issues. Why are we not spending the same amount of time and the same amount of resources and financial obligations and manpower and giving priority to issues where we can handle mitigation and flooding at the exact same time? If you really want to be looking at this for down the road, why aren't we giving staff the direction that, hey, if you're going to bring forward a project that deals with flooding, we want to see an opportunity or priority given to projects that will also handle mitigation? Whether it's diverting water into gravel pits, or it's reservoir, or it's any 1,000 other options that might possibly be out there. There's a lot smarter people than those of us sitting up here that can figure those out. But until we give them that direction, we'll continue to deal with these as separate issues, and we'll continue to have two sides pointing fingers at each other, and it will continue to be divisive and angry, and we will get nowhere. And so if we want to put forward something, let's put forward that tonight. Let's pass this, and then give direction to these guys to come forward with solutions.
Ms. Brenner.
Something that Councilmember Sadoo said that made me realize, I don't know if I've even said it before, and I am not speaking for all well owners, and I've got mine. So, I don't have a personal interest, but I do. And one thing I realized, and everybody I know who has wells has said the same thing to me, people who have wells are extremely cautious. Individual residential well owners are extremely cautious in the dry months because their well could go dry if they're not. That's a huge expense if you can even get another one dug that would get you to the water table. So to even imply that most people who have wells are just, I got my right, I'll just use everything I want. I don't think most people with wells operate that way. I don't think if they care at all about the costs or the consequences, they would operate that way.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Tim Ballou,
Yes.
Barbara Brenner,
Yes.
Rudd Brown,
Yes.
Barry Buchanan,
Yes.
Tyler Bird,
Yes.
Todd Donovan,
No.
Satpal Sidhu,
Yes.
That passes 6-1 with Mr. Donovan opposed. Next item up is the open public session. No, the other one.
She didn't together.
So for clarity for those who may be a bit unsure of this process, because this is a little unusual for us, is we had the original emergency moratorium, or emergency ordinance.
It's being replaced.
It's been replaced, but the original emergency ordinance was passed but required us to hold a public hearing within 60 days. And we've held that public hearing tonight. And then what we've just voted on is the interim ordinance, which changes the code. So in both the emergency and the interim ordinance were effectively identical. So with that, now this is the open public session. And again, just remind everybody, during the open session, audience members will have up to 3 minutes to address the council on any issue relevant to county business. Before beginning to comment, please state your name and topic of interest for the record. If your last name is something other than Smith or Jones, please spell it for the clerk. Please make sure to speak into the microphone. Please stand behind the signs located in the aisles as a courtesy to other speakers. Thank you for your cooperation. And you can stand behind both of these if you wish. So please come up.
My name is Ben Silva, S-I-L-V-A. I'm from Ferndale, and I'm here to urge you to support moving forward in the docketing of the zoning amendments proposed by the DNR to create a sustainable access for the ORV community for Whatcom County. I represent 161 members of the official Upper Skagit ORV Club, but more importantly, I'm here as an uncle and a father. It's been proposed and talked about for many years to have an ORV trail system here in Whatcom County. We're incredibly blessed to have such a beautiful forest in our own backyard, and I love taking my nieces, nephews, and especially my own children up into the mountains to see the wonderful views and vistas that can be had by just going up the logging road system. When I ride, I try to set an example. I want to be the example that people follow. And when I ride, I feel like the forest isn't yours. It's not ours. I feel like it's mine, like my own house or my children. It's mine to nurture and care for. Without moving forward and docketing the proposal, the community, the ORV community, cannot gain legal access to the forest. Allowing legal access isn't just wanted, it's needed. Because without a local area to ride, many people, just without any consideration for the natural environment, watershed, and the hills and whatnot, just create their own paths wherever they want to go. And it's apparent if you were to take some time and go through any of the logging roads, and you can follow any of these paths cut through, and they go through creeks, wetlands, wherever it looks like it might be fun. Taking the nearby Walker Valley in Skagit County, for example, it's an organized trail system. It allows all kinds of ORVs to access the forest in an organized manner. Since many people are there enjoying the system, there's much less littering and garbage dumping, since there's many people there to police it than you would find here locally. Many organizations, such as the Upper Skagit ORV Club, work many volunteer hours, have many volunteers and work many hours to keep it that way. There's also systems in place to mitigate the runoff that would affect the local creeks, watershed.
30 seconds,
And it's
please.
also maintained by many volunteers and many volunteer hours to keep it sustainable to mitigate environmental harm. Allowing the docketing of the DNR's proposal wouldn't guarantee the ORV community access to the forest. It would just allow the process to move forward, to allow us to further investigate, debate, study, and propose the best way to move forward. With allowing such access to the forest, I believe it would be a great asset to our forest and not a detriment or a menace. I thank you for your time and your consideration.
Hi, my name is John Shaughnessy.
Sorry,
First
please hang
name-
on a second. Did you
sorry.
want to ask a question, Mr.
Yeah,
Bird?
I did.
Oh, cool.
Thanks. Ben,
Yes.
first I'd like to say I think you're starting off by giving a terrific example to your kids, just coming here today and testifying, so thank you very much for that. But on this topic, I also have a question. We're getting inundated right now with emails about this, and I'm just curious, one, is there any place in Whatcom County to ride right now for?
Other than just sticking on the logging roads, no, there is no legal place to take an off-road vehicle.
Okay.
Like I said, if you were to head up any of these logging roads, you'll see these little paths that just head up a hill, or head down some closed-off logging road, and it'll go through a wetland, it'll go through a creek. Like I said, just anywhere that someone goes, hey, that looks like a challenge, that looks like fun. Without any consideration to, okay, well, is that a salmon stream? Are we climbing this? Is this hill being climbed? Is it going to get so wet in the winter that it's going to present a slide? Is it going to kill this old growth tree? There's no consideration for that. Where, like I said, in Walker Valley as an example, the trail system is organized in such a way that if there's going to be any runoff that would potentially do harm to the environment, there's mitigations in place, settling ponds, culverts, to prevent, stuff like that from happening. And trails are rebuilt mostly by volunteers. So it's kept in a fashion where it allows people to go out, have their fun, but still preserve the environment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, next one up, please.
Good evening. My name's Dean Crosswhite. I'm from Ferndale, Crosswhite. I'm asking the council tonight to approve the inclusion of the zoning amendments proposed by the DNR on the 2018 docket for review by the Planning Department. The proposed text amendments will help to create a safe, legal, and sustainable access to our forest for the ORV community. First of all, Ben did a great job of already explaining exactly why I'm here. The same reason. I recently purchased a Jeep here a couple years ago, and the first thing I did was join a club. And the club was great, because I said, all right, I got some people that can fix me when I break down, right? And so I asked them, I said, well, where do we go, off-roading at? And they said, there's no place in Whatcom County that we can go, which I was surprised. We have a beautiful forest land. I do mountain biking, I do trail running, yet there's no place for me here in this county to go. And so they took me down to Walker Valley. And the very first day I went down there, I thought, okay, we're gonna get out on the road, we're gonna do some four-wheeling. And it was EE Day, which is a Environmental Education Day. So I spent the whole morning learning about trail systems, about how to properly recreate on state lands. We were given spill kits, garbage sacks, and the whole afternoon I went and picked up garbage. So that was my first day of four-wheeling, lots of fun. But what I realized was this club, the clubs that they have out there, they're really kind of the key to a stewardship of the land. These guys really are out there looking out for the environment. They're watching for people that are doing things illegal, and they'll report them or at least educate them on how to do things properly. And thus, like Ben was saying, the ORV trail system down in Walker Valley is a very well-maintained system that we are constantly out there volunteering to keep improvements upon, make sure the crossings are correct across streams, and that we're not damaging any wetland areas. This fall, I was invited to go with the DNR's oversight to a cleanup up in Sumas Mountain. We took a large dumpster, it was a huge garbage dumpster, and there must have been 30 or 40 of us. And within about 2 or 3 hours, we had filled that dumpster with just tons of garbage that had been dumped up there. You don't see that down in Walker Valley, where there's an organized systems, there's clubs, and there's policing of that. And the trail system up there off of Sumas Mountain, as Ben said, you have these renegades or these pirate off-roaders that will take and run trails wherever they want to go. Terrible for the environment. And so by having a planned system in place, like the DNR is proposing.
30 seconds,
they do
please.
this all over the state where they have planned systems. We can help mitigate some of those trail systems and let us have a single place where we can recreate with our vehicles. So along with the other groups that will be advocating for this, the horsemen, the motorbikes, I got a whole list of them, clubs, that are advocating for you to put this on the docket so we can at least have a plan in place. And this is gonna take a few years to get through, so it's gonna be a while. But at least put it on the docket so we can put a plan and demonstrate the difference between an organized system down in Walker Valley and what's going on now, which is there's
Time.
no plan in place right now, so.
The horseback
Oh, sorry,
guys
the
are
Country
for it?
Horsemen of American River, Whatcom chapter, Backcountry Horsemen and American Rivers. So, all these, but a lot of these clubs, what they advocate is that we have an organized system for recreational use up in the DNR lands. And so, they're just an advocate, just as we are, to use the public lands responsibly, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Mrs.
Can I ask you a quick question? How many miles that Upper Skagit Valley Park is?
Yeah, so I'm in Ferndale, so it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to get from Ferndale
to there?
To down to the.
So, my argument would be if there is something already existing,
Yes.
which is within our reach, and they have already spent time, and if there are more people join it, actually it will make it more successful, because they will get more members and membership and all this, rather than just because we live in Whatcom County, we must have one in Whatcom County as well. So actually it will dilute, because there are only so many people who are interested in that kind of activity. Why don't we strengthen that and make it even better, rather than creating something new?
So unfortunately, it already happens in Whatcom County on a regular basis, just on a pirate level. People go up and do it on their own. And what happens down in Walker Valley, when the clubs take responsibility, they self-police that, and you see very little of that down there. So, I understand your point, but I think a regulated system here is better than what's happening now, which is no regulation.
Thank you.
But I think you're good.
Hi, my name is John Shaughnessy. The first name is spelled Jon, and the last name is spelled Shaughnnessy. I'm here first, of course, to thank you for the action you've already taken to work with Homes Now as part of a way in which this county is addressing not just the homeless problem, but the problem of poverty in general. And the reason I bring that up first is that I am here primarily to speak about the Poor People's Campaign. You may have heard about it 50 years ago when Martin Luther King Jr. Was getting it organized. He was planning to start the process on Mother's Day 1968, and unfortunately he was shot before then. Reverend William Barber II has picked up where Martin left off. About 10 years ago, he started the process of organizing things. You may know of him as the Moral Mondays preacher in North Carolina. And I recently came in contact with the program is now already set to begin on Mother's Day 2018, the 50th anniversary. And it will be in 35 state capitals are already organized to do this. It may actually be in all the 50 capitals, but it certainly will be in Olympia with the day of civil disobedience and for some people direct action rather than that. The main thing is that it is a program like someone here, just right here, Mr. Sidhu said, how to solve bigger problems. The problem of the homeless in Whatcom County is a very big problem, but it is a small part of a much larger problem, which is the homeless all over the country. And that in turn is a small part of the bigger problem of poverty in this country. And Martin Luther King, 50 years ago, and many people today believe that part of the solution is the power of poor people themselves to address those problems. And to do that in a nonpartisan way, to do that in a way which, as Mr. Tyler pointed out, we need to look at solutions that we all agree on. We need to get together.
30 seconds, please.
What's that? Yeah. Different churches, etc. Now, I'll use the rest of my time to answer your questions about how this is happening. We'll also include a march on Washington on June 21st. So, fire away.
No. We are good.
What's that?
I said we are good.
We are good. I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay.
As you mentioned.
All right, Mr. Peterson. And if there's anybody else who wishes to speak at the open session, please line up behind the signs.
Hi, my name's Jim Peterson, President of Homes Now. I live at 5 Sunnyside Lane in Sudden Valley. PDTURSON. First, I want to thank the work of the Public Works and Health Committee this morning. And I want to thank all the members of County Council for being there. I was shocked. I thought it was just going to be 3, and it was 7, which made me more nervous. I'd like to talk a little bit more in detail about what we talked about this morning, and that's basically how, once this pilot project is up and running, how it's going to sustain itself. The first people that move in are going to have an income, either veterans disability, Social Security disability, working, whatever. And we're going to charge them 20% of their income or $250, whichever is less. And that money will be used to pay the bills like electric, water, sewer, repairs. Also, what is left from monthly, whatever's left out of the month, like say we have $2,000 and the bills are only $1,500 for the month, then we'll put that $500 in the bank in a fund. So when people are ready to move, if they need help with a deposit or hook up their utilities, we'll have a reserve fund. Or say the furnace in the community building breaks, we'll have money in the reserve fund to fix it. We're going to ask all the residents to be actively involved in the community. They will be running the community at first. Probably for the first week, I'll be living in the community building, making sure that we don't have any emergencies, and kind of like raising your kids, get them up and running and then let them run. And then we'll elect officers out of the people that live there, and everybody will be responsible for cooking. Like if there's six tiny homes, then what we're going to ask is that each tiny home cooks for the other 5 one night a week, and then on the 7th night, we're going to try to find a church or anybody that wants to come in and feed that night. And that way we keep it running. We're also planning on, if we get the land, the right land, to put in a community garden. And in front of every tiny home, there'll also be a planter that's 2 by 3 foot.
30 seconds, please.
To grow flowers or vegetables or whatever. And so I really am encouraged by what I've been hearing, and hopefully we can move forward. And our goal is, and this is maybe too big, we'd like to be starting end of April or beginning of May and be ready to, our contractor said he can have it done in a month once we have the land. So we would like to be, by the end of May, all set and running.
Time.
Oh, and I'm going to introduce Carmen. She's going to safe storage. She's trying to get safe storage for the homeless. And we've agreed that we're going to let her put 12 units of safe storage on our property. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Hello, I'm Carmen Gilmore, Whatcom County resident. I was present at the council's Public Works Committee meeting earlier today when Homes Now presented their tiny homes project. And as a Homes Now supporter since the beginning, I have to say it was absolutely thrilling and heartwarming to see the council's positive response to this project and willingness to work with Homes Now going forward. You don't realize how much hope you've brought to those of us desperately wanting to see every one of our community members housed, so thank you for that. This evening, in addition to stating my full support for the Homes Now project, I'd like to use this opportunity to bring to the council's attention another grassroots pilot project that I'm involved with called Safe Storage. In front of you for your reference are a one-page info sheet and a draft design of the project. For people experiencing homelessness in Whatcom County, the next most important and urgent need after housing is a safe place to store one's important personal belongings. Without this, most people experiencing homelessness carry everything they own with them 24/7. This is a huge mental and physical burden. The Safe Storage Pilot Project consists of specially designed outdoor storage lockers for people experiencing homelessness to safely store important personal belongings as they go about their day to work, job hunt, attend classes, use public transportation, go to appointments, and work on daily goals. Access to these lockers eliminates some of the barriers towards finding permanent housing and transitioning off the streets. Based on the philosophy, nothing about us without us, this project is a direct result of working with, being directed by, and listening to the voices of our community members without homes. Listening to what the folks who are experiencing homelessness every day are saying is needed. This pilot project, run by the nonprofit Basics PNW, will consist of approximately 24 outdoor lockers in 2 to 3 locations around downtown Bellingham, with the goal of growing the number of lockers and locations as quickly as possible to meet countywide demand. If you turn to page 2 of the draft design, left side of the page, you'll notice that the front of the lockers will have a personal key code and a mail slot for communicating with the user via written notes and for providing mail delivery, which eliminates another huge barrier for people experiencing homelessness. Locker users will sign a month-to-month use agreement and be connected to lockers through partner organizations. Each locker will be large enough to fit suitcases, backpacks, personal hygiene items, extra clothing, and more. Other features include safety lighting and cameras, a 24-hour contact number posted on the lockers to ensure the safety and needs of clients and the public, anti-graffiti paint, and the
30
option
seconds, please.
for lockers to be customized for each specific location with a street art feel to complement and add to the character of the surrounding neighborhood. Lockers are still in the design phase as we work out the best and most cost-effective materials and best client usability. Build and installation can begin as early as spring 2018. We are seeking community-wide feedback and support and would welcome the opportunity to dialogue with the council to discuss how we might work together to make this vital project happen. And my contact information is at the bottom of the one-page info sheet. Thank you very much.
We got it in. Wow.
Thank you. If there's anybody else, please step up to the signs.
John Campbell, Council District 3. I would just like to encourage the council to vote yes for moving forward with the Homes Now project and show that there are people in this community that care about their neighbors without homes. Thank you.
So I'm not going to take up too much time, but I just wanted to thank all the council members earlier today for hearing our proposal and listening to it. And you know, it's actually really nice and that Tyler Bird and Barbara Brenner actually came out and saw what we already did, and Barry for going down to TC5 with Jim. That's amazing. And any of the rest of the council members, if you want to come out and see what we've already done to prove it. Yeah. Like, come out anytime. We're happy to have you out there. We'll arrange an appointment or a time. I also wanted to thank Carmen for the safe storage project. You know, when we're thinking about a pilot project like this, there's actually a lot of overlap. So there's actually a way to do multiple things at the same time at a very small expense, where there's like a Venn diagram where everybody's like able to do a lot of what they want to do to help people that are homeless or people that are low income at a very little cost to the overall community. Like, we're not looking for, you know, any taxpayer dollars, just a little bit of help. And so we really appreciate what you guys have done so far, and we're looking forward to a long working relationship. So thank you. Much appreciated. Doug Gustafson, the technical director of Homes. So. Thank you, Doug.
Hi, I'm Dana Carr, Whatcom County resident and Homes Now supporter. And I just wanted to show my gratitude to the council for beginning to work with the organization and explore the possibilities there. And it's just really exciting and encouraging to see that happening. And I know there's a lot of people in the community who are watching and are at the ready to join that as the ball keeps rolling, and are galvanized by that sort of thing. So thank you. That's all.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Joanne Pattern, Pattern, and I worked with Jim at the Tent City we had across the street, and I urge you to do this Homes Now. It is a great organization. We had the Tent City, and working with the homeless, it's sad to see how cold it is outside, how hard it is to deal every day from the time they get up to figure out what they're going to do with all their things, what they have to get rid of from the time they get up, and how they figure out what they're going to do with their day, how they're going to deal with all their life. And during the Tent City, they felt safe and united and together, and they didn't feel feared at night when they had to figure out what they were going to do as their evening went on, where they were going to go to the bathroom, where they were going to hide. And it was safe for a week or two. And so Homes Now is finding them a place. And I urge you to work with Jim and Doug and to make this happen. So we all want to work with them. So thank you for helping us out. So thanks again.
Mr. Willing.
Robin Dexter, Bellingham.
Sorry, Robin.
Back to water. I just want to say, after listening to all the Homes Now people, that I do remember that you guys have to deal with more than just water. So, thanks, and I'd like to say I support.
Doesn't feel like it, by the way.
And I'm really supportive of everything you can do for these people. It's inspiring to hear that other things are happening than just what I'm concerned about. That said, I've got nothing to say about the ordinances, but I would like to encourage you to get your hands on some of that mitigation money, and I have a specific idea in mind. And you guys have alluded to it, Mr. Donovan and Mr. Sadhu. We seem to be headed for another iteration of the WIRA process. And so I want to suggest that one thing is more important than everything else, and that is, let's get a handle once and for all on water use, and we'll solve everything else. That's the key to it. Universal metering is what we need. All the municipal governments meter water use. All the water associations countywide meter water use. You can't be a customer of the PUD without a meter, and that includes irrigation customers. The only people that aren't metered are exempt wells and farmers. And we've all bandied about the figures for illegal water use in farm country, and I don't have any better answer than anyone else. But until we answer that question, we're not going to get anywhere solving this problem. Universal metering is nothing to be feared. What we have, and don't laugh, what we have is the theft of public resources, right? So let's get a handle on that. All of the enabling legislation, 2514, which created the WIRA process, and 6091 includes wide latitude to solve these problems if you go about them seriously. So all the objections to metering about relinquishment and water spreading, those all go away because there's great deference
30 seconds, please.
to local entities that go about this seriously. So I would say take those mitigation funds, provide meters for exempt wells, provide subsidies for farmers, and let's add it all up. And then let's give everybody a little holiday for relinquishment and spread the water around. But it's time to get serious about it because nothing else works until you do that and you know where the water's going. Thanks.
And if there's anybody else, please step up, otherwise we'll be closing the open public session.
Yeah, my name is Cynthia Livingston, Livingston. And as someone who is seeking to find out more and educate myself about homes now and the homeless situation here in Whatcom County, I just want to say thank you to Homes Now and to the council, because it's very heartening to hear that progress is being made, things are being done, that you guys are so open and receptive to working with them, that we're living in a place where that's happening and not like in other parts of the country where you hear about activists who try, they can't get anything done desperately, they make some tiny houses, try to help some people, the houses get confiscated, or any number of things like that that we hear about that happen in other parts of the country. And I just want to thank people on both sides, like I said, Homes Now, all of you, and just speak out my support for this, and that I look forward to seeing the progress that is going to be made and seeing how I personally maybe can help in some way. So once again, thank you.
My name is Vaughn Ochoa, Vonochoa. Just wanted to say thank you again for all of the time and attention and presence earlier today. In support of Homes Now, something that I just wanted to add to all of this, and my involvement with them and being blessed with being chosen to be the first recipient of the first tiny home on this pilot project. One thing that I think is that is really important for me to express is that Homes Now, and I know they're kind of getting this reputation as the tiny homes guys, but I want to re-emphasize that it's, or at least kind of shine the light on, they're the house the homeless guys, not just the tiny homes guys, and that there's this larger message of there's the homelessness problem, there's the problem of poverty, and this is calling to greater awareness in our community that we're really just a few very delicate circumstances from becoming each other and being pushed out of our homes, pushed out onto the streets or what have you. And Homes Now is breaking the stereotypes of like who is so undeserving and unworthy, and there's so much focus on those who just don't deserve more support. And Homes Now is showing that a lot of people who are facing this kind of grinding poverty or very precarious, stable poverty, we're folks who still want to live a very conscientious life, and if we are given opportunities and the time, we're going to show that there's more of us who have the dignity and who are responsible and can prove that we're not less than. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's anybody else who wishes to speak, please come up to the podium. Please come up to the signs. Thank you.
My name is Victoria Savage, S-A-V-A-G-E, and I'm from Bellingham. I have successfully been able to avoid doing this for the last several months. I have been homeless twice in my life. Once at 16 due to physical abuse, again at the age of 20 when I had an irresponsible employer who failed to pay my 941 taxes during the Christmas season. I have been vilified by friends, threatened with sexual abuse just to trade for a bed and a warm place to sleep. I'd had the indignity of asking my friends to leave my shopping cart outside so I wouldn't bring bugs into their home. And tonight I have no choice but to disclose this to you and beg of you for your support for the homeless. As Mr. Ochoa very aptly put it, there is no one that just deserves to be homeless. I have worked very hard in my life. Up until 6 months ago, I owned a small business in the county for 20 years. I lived above it in order to save money. I achieved what looks like the American dream. I now am a member of the real middle class. It was not without a lot of hard work, 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, and I can tell you without a doubt, the hardest work I ever did is when I was homeless. If it weren't for the grace of a 16-year-old prostitute that allowed me to use her room to keep my clothing and shower and clean myself up, I wouldn't have been able to find a job. Everyone deserves a hands up. I ask that you support the tandem projects of the safe storage as well as the Homes Now Not Later. And thank you, and I really didn't mean to fall apart like this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Hi, Marcus D. Stidham, S-T-I-D-H-A-M. And I thought about not even saying anything tonight. I thank you all for your support. I know that you do. I see it in your faces. I'm really appreciative of it. It's very heartening, and I feel represented by you all. Thank you. I feel you represent our community well. Thank you. Like Vicki, I had my problems when I was in my youth. At 14, I came out here on my own, kind of kicked out of the house in Minnesota, and I found myself in a tiny home village, actually, a fishing camp on Lummi Island, where I reef netted, and I was there for the next season for the boss to put me right back to work too. The stability that there's just a simple cabin, a shack, and a wood stove provided for me. I actually went to high school on my own, right, and kept a reef net job and other side jobs and paid $20 a month rent, you know? It worked for me. I fed the nation from the salmon that I caught over tens of years, almost 20 years of fishing. I, paid my taxes, B&O taxes, and doing businesses here in Bellingham. I'm a homeowner. I'm very supportive of what's going on here because I completely believe in it. And I believe you do too, and I just wanted to say thank you. So the only real reason I'm here now is to say, let's all dig our spurs in, let's all think outside the box. This is a fleet, agile, and able group of people. These guys really impress me, so I'm on board. And I'm glad you are too. So think outside the box, pour on the coals to this thing, and let's get homes going right now. It's a cold one tonight, guys. I feel that bite, and we all do. And it doesn't go away all night for these people. So let's fix that for them. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on the open session? Seeing none, we'll close the open session, and the next item up is the consent agenda. Mr. Sidhu.
Yes. We had a Finance and Administration Services Committee meeting today, earlier in the afternoon. It was actually morning. The first item from that is request authorization for the county executive to enter into a contract amendment between Whatcom County and City of Bellingham to provide for joint usage of Vector waste site facility from January 1, 2018 through December 31st, 2018 due to the rate increase from $54.36 per ton to $147.56 per ton, AB 2018-062. It received 3-0 approval vote from the committee, and I so move.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Buchanan.
This is a consent agenda?
Yes.
We don't typically go through every item?
No, I understand that. I was...
Oh, okay.
So...
I shall read all of them then. Okay.
Well, no. If it's a consent agenda, Mr. Buchanan's point is if it's a consent agenda item, they've been read into the record this morning. So you just indicate if we've considered items 1 through 3 and they've all, if they all, for example, received unanimous vote, then you would just move all of them at the same time.
Thank you. Yes.
So
there are 3 items on the consent agenda. And we had the discussion in the committee meeting, and they all received 3-0 vote, and I move acceptance of these 3 items.
Thank you, Mr. Sidhu. And,
second. Hey, I'm learning. I can be trained.
We're all learning.
So just a brief background on parliamentary procedure. Because they have made it through the committee.
We don't need a second.
We don't need a second.
Got it.
I kept doing that.
Well, we're both rookies now.
I was voting on
That's
the
all
committee,
right.
I wasn't on.
By the way, I'm sure it took me longer to get used to it than it will for you.
Keeping you on your toes here.
Okay. So we've considered items 1 through 3. There's been a motion to approve. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those pass unanimously. And next item up was the ordinance adopting amendments to the Whatcom County Code, Title 2, Administrative Personnel Title 9, Public Peace, Morals, Welfare, Title 15, Building and Construction, Title 16, Environmental, Title 20, Zoning, Title 21, Land Division Regulations, Title 23, Shoreline Management Program, Title 24, Health, and creating a new Title 22, Land Use and Development Procedures to relocate and revise procedures for land use and development related permits and legislative actions. This was held in committee with a recommendation to staff to come back and to present this to council in segments. Next item up is back to you, Mr. Sidhu.
I'm sorry, I was distracting everybody.
Sorry. Okay. From the Finance and Administration Services Committee, now there are items which I will read individually and do that. Okay, good. So the first one was resolution canceling uncollectible personal property taxes, AB 2018-060. So we had a good discussion on that there are certain taxes on the property which are uncollectible, and it received 3-0 vote, and I so move.
Mr. Sidhu has moved approval. Any discussion?
Second.
No. to say?
He voted against, that's
I'll
what it
second.
was.
We don't need to say.
It was two,
I'm just jumping on board
two
here.
one vote.
I'll move approval, you second, somebody do something.
Okay.
Can we vote?
You're going to throw me off my game now.
Trying to do.
All right, as we have a motion. It is
2
three-
seconds.
3 seconds.
We didn't-
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 7-0.
The next item is executive laws, request approval of economic development investment, excuse me, EDI board recommendation for funding as presented in the attached EDI fund applications and approval of the housing affordable for the workforce guidelines. There were two projects. One was for the Northwest Linden Fair for WSU to put up a new facility there, and second one is for the housing affordable workforce guidelines. That's $500,000 to put it into that fund for the low-income housing. Both of these received 3-0 votes, and I so move.
And for clarity, we are voting in the yellow version of this document, which was submitted on February 12th at 10 a.m. So we have a motion to approve. Any discussion? Mr. Bird.
So on this, I wanted to go back to something that you said, Mr. Sadu, in the committee meeting, and that was that we should have some sort of, or there was some sort of ranking system discussed at some point. And that's been sitting with me since the committee meeting, because to be approving funds when we don't have, when we're not looking at the actual impact. I'm going to go back to kind of where I was with the other issue.
Sure.
And I really liked the idea, especially for this EDI program, to have the ability to rank projects and then to invest in projects that either meet a certain ranking, or when we have multiple projects, to be able to rank, to invest in the project that has the highest impact. Versus right now, I do feel like, looking back at this, that we're not only investing in programs where we don't necessarily know what the impact is, but we're investing in programs without a budget that's laid out that determines how much we're investing in each year, what money we'll be putting forward. And so while I really like both of these programs, I would like to see us pull something through this that requires ratings moving forward.
Yes, I agree with that, and actually this was brought up last year, that when we were discussing EDI funding for many projects in our county, and there is a ranking system, but it needed a revision. And I think that as a finance committee, we should work over next couple of months and 3 months and revisit all this ranking. But at the same time, the function of the county council and finance committee depends on the proceedings of the EDI board. So we make a ranking system, give it to EDI board, and then they do that, and then we can evaluate from there. So that is the process. And I think that we should work on that ranking system and present it back to the EDI board for their consideration.
Mr. Donovan.
Yeah, I think I was the one who brought up the ranking thing at the hearing, and I share Mr. Bird's frustration on this. But I was bringing that up, and I'm going to support these kind of reluctantly, not because I'm reluctant about the quality or what they're doing, but I can't remember, like 6 months ago, got that out and, kind of called the administration out about, like, we want information from the board. The first one I saw, it had like a points total, and if it didn't have this many points, it wasn't going to qualify, and that, we prioritized jobs now if you build it, jobs will come if you build it, or like no jobs and some other thing. And I think as a council, I'll admit, I dropped the ball on trying to push towards looking at how we want to prioritize those things. And I think we just sort of, it's sort of on us. We left it to the EDI board. We didn't really leave them with much instruction on how to do this. So I think that's incumbent upon us to do that. But, we had a really robust discussion about the item coming up after this about, do we have cost benefit analysis on this stuff? So I think on the first one of these that I got, I voted against it. Just out of I didn't get the process. I still don't get the process. I think I got Tyler nodding his head over there. But we dropped the ball on telling the board how we want to get information about how these things should be ranked. So I think we need to,
Yep.
at some point we're
And,
talking about, we're going to pick that up.
And I really appreciate Tyler's efforts. This Tyler, not the other Tyler. But I think it is a very important point, and thanks for being persistent and calling it out. And I think this is something that we should work in our committee to improve this process. Okay, with that said, this did receive 3-0 votes, and I so move.
And for the record, I appreciate the efforts of all Tylers in the room. So Ms. Brenner.
Well, I'm looking at this a little differently. I totally agree with what you said, and I appreciate you pushing on this. And I like that you have that thing in your brain that lets you see those kind of details, which I don't always see. But to me, the EDI board's a little different because it's made up of the people who are taxing themselves. And I do believe, even whether we give them enough, information or not, that I do think generally we should be very respectful of any recommendations they make with their own money, because it is their money. So I'm supporting it, and I think, and also I support the program. And I got the impression from the fellow who was presenting that he does feel, we didn't get like the dollars and cents part, but that he feels very strongly that it's going to save us a lot of money. So
That's a separate thing. This is not that.
Oh, it is?
No, that money is not EDI, that's EMS money, what you are mentioning.
But I thought it was through EDI. Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay. The EDI is the
EDI is
affordable
that,
housing part, and the,
and the
Washington
Linden State. The Linden, the
Okay.
extension.
Well, for the same reasons, I
Okay.
support that.
Yes.
But,
Okay.
yeah, I just feel like we may have dropped the ball.
Yeah.
But we dropped it, not the EDI board. And again, it's their money. And if they want to change their rules and anything in the future, I'd be very open to listening to whatever they would like to do. I give a lot of deference to that board because, like I say, it's their money. So.
Okay.
Ms. Brenner, I think you're thinking of the Tourism Advisory
Yeah.
Group, because that's the
I
one
thought
that's
EDI also.
No, EDI is a percentage of the sales tax from,
Right.
but everybody.
From those
pay-
businesses.
No, from the entire community.
Tyler, come up here,
It's a
please.
rebate from the state.
It's a rebate from the state of the sales tax.
But I thought it was from,
It's your money as well, you're paying.
oh,
into
I'm
it.
paying it too?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's,
Oh,
It's the public's money. It's
it's a
not,
public money.
so what am I thinking of? That's the one where the businesses tax themselves?
The lodging advisory.
Lodging and,
Oh, okay. My mistake.
yeah, she
I
got
get
it.
Let the record show that Tyler said, I don't know.
Sorry, it's been a long day. Okay, let's see. Well, then that's not my reason.
Record shall show that the other
But I
time.
do think, no, I had too much dark chocolate.
okay,
Leave me
right.
alone. I got to get this finished. I do think that, didn't that guy give a very strong presentation that,
We'll come to that. That's next item. So let's finish
that's
this.
still
one.
not about these two?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Point about the board.
I need more chocolate. What?
Point about the board is good.
It was good? Oh, thank you.
Okay, well,
All right,
it's
so is there any further discussion on this item?
No.
Seeing none, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously.
Okay, the
Oh,
next
you changed
item
your mind. That's
is
so neat.
a request authorization for the county executive to enter into a contract between Whatcom County and Image Trend, Inc. for software licenses, professional services, and annual fees to implement a regional electronic patient care reporting software system for emergency medical services in the amount of $143,134.20. And this is AB 2018-064, and it received 2-1 votes in the committee, and I so move.
So we have a motion.
Second.
For discussion, right?
Came out of committee. But that's fine. We've got a motion and a extra second. Any discussion?
No.
Mr. Burke?
Thought we were gonna.
Nope, sorry.
It's okay, you're right. Actually, you're right.
I'm just gonna make sure Tyler's thoroughly fed up with me at this point. I voted no on this earlier today, and I'm going to vote no on it again today. And it is not because I don't support this program. By looking at this program, for all due effect, it appears that it is going to be a fantastic program for us. The reason that I'm voting no is because I think it's our responsibility to manage public dollars and tax dollars in the most efficient manner we possibly can. And for me, looking at this, along with all the other things that we approve and how we move forward with things, I feel like so many times so far in the first couple meetings that I've sat here, a lot of the things we talk about them and say, this is what we should do, but we'll get to it at some point. And we never actually get to the point of doing it. And I don't know how else to get us to the point of doing it other than saying, I'm not going to vote yes until we start doing things the right way. And for me, doing things the right way is having clear measurements in which it says, hey, these are the metrics that we're going to measure success of this program by, whether it's reducing employee costs or increasing communication, or it's being able to spend less man hours so we don't have to hire again in the future. Whatever it is, having very clear measurements that are data oriented so that when we get down the road in a year or 2 years, we can look back and without a doubt say whether that program was successful or not. I think that's important, one. And two, in the cases where we can look at a cost-benefit analysis and determine that it is going to be in the best interest of the public, that we make our best attempt to do so. Because I think for us, it's a great opportunity to show everyone else in this country and in this community that we can do things responsibly with public dollars. And if we just move past those opportunities and don't require them, then we'll always move past those opportunities and no one will ever do them. And so this is a great opportunity to do that with something that I think is gonna pass anyway, but also would be a really great starting point for people to start looking at what are those success measurements, when are we gonna review them to make sure that it was successful, and how are we gonna justify this spend and funds.
Ms. Brenner?
You're a metrics person and I'm
I
not.
am.
No, I like that you are. What, I mean, we could we could say that and then the administration could come to us and say, here's the numbers. I mean, no offense to anybody in the administration, but how do we know those are accurate numbers? I mean, how do you get to that point?
Well, I think especially with this program, we would have, I mean, the point of this program is to have data. And so we should be able to look at that, and it should be objective data that we can pull out of the system. And so what we would have to do is come to a process to benchmark where we are at today. And whether that's looking at how long it takes to input the data as it currently stands using the technology we currently have, and comparing that in a year to how fast it takes to input that same amount of data and what that cost savings is multiplied by what the hourly wages are of the people that are doing it, and then how many of those that we would have to do in a given year. I mean, that would be a fairly basic analysis that we could do to justify this expense. But when you look at the presentation he gave a number of kind of benefits. They weren't measurements, but they were benefits. And those benefits, more billing income with less effort equals less or a higher percentage increase of real dollars. If we could put real data around that measurement and look back at it in a year, and before it automatically renews, that would be in the best interest of the community, right? I mean, if we're approving this thing, we're gonna put it into place. Here's the measurements that we will be monitoring and what we expect it to hit. And in 1 year, we look back at those and we determine objectively, is it successful? And if it is, then it automatically continues to renew. If it is not, then it goes away, right? And I feel like that's an area that we in government get ourselves into a lot, which is we pass things, we don't have success measurements, and we never go back and review them, determine if they were successful and if they're having the impact that we wanted them to have. And until we start doing that, I just don't know how we can become responsible with taxpayer dollars. But
What
Tyler,
about-
I think you're here because you want to say something.
Can I just say one thing, and then you may be going to say exactly what I don't know. Well, why couldn't we vote for this for 1 year and then look, because he did say, we're going to do all these things. He didn't give data, but he said it.
That's exactly the problem that you run into though, right? Is because when you get down the point and you look back in a year, if you have not set success benchmarks, what those measurements are that you'll be measuring and what you anticipate them to be from a quantifiable data standpoint, then it's objective or subjective, right? And so you'll be able to decide then, was it successful? And that's where we go back to the original statement that drew my attention to this, which was under measurements, it said it will become apparent. That's not a success measurement. That's not a success. Yeah. And that's where you get to in a year, unless you have very clear guidance and data that you set up in advance. But
Mr. Schroeder and then, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, are you finished?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Schroeder and then Mr. Donovan.
I'll just go real quick. Tyler Schroeder, Deputy Executive. I totally respect and understand the line of questioning in regards to the ROI and the metric and the outcomes. And we've been thinking a lot about it since we had the conversation this morning. I sat down and discussed with some of the fire chiefs on this one specifically. And one thing that I think is important is we don't have that baseline data today. And so that's what this document is going to get us, so that in the future, we will be able to go back and measure. And that's, I think, why we articulated it will become apparent on how it gets done and where it goes. As it relates to return on investment, there was a conversation earlier in the slide from this morning about billing and the efficiencies on billing. And so if billing is reduced from a 7-day turnaround to a 1 to 2 day turnaround, and there is an increase, the example I think was in Wisconsin, it was a 20%. If it is only 10% here in Whatcom County, for ALS fees, that'd be over $200,000 of additional EMS fee revenue that would come in, because currently we collect about $2 million on the year for EMS fees. And so that $200,000 right there would pay for the annual cost of this EPCR system. As it relates to the one-time fees, we are moving forward with this EPCR system countywide so that the other districts out in the community don't have to take that next step and invest in the same type of software. That's over 10 to 13 different districts that don't have to take that action. So even on the one-time cost from constituent-wide, maybe not just Whatcom County as a government, but from the government plus all those other special districts, the fire districts, are saving money right there by only expending about $50,000 for the one-time fees, instead of having each individual district take those actions. So as it relates to this contract, I think you can play that out. I would ask council if the conversation about measures and outcomes and return on investment are important, kind of similar to what we just talked about. We need to hear from the body of council on how best to explain that to the administration, because we have a number of different contracts. They don't always look the same, and they're for a number of different purposes. So we will need some input from council, maybe through finance committee or whatnot, to help us understand a little bit more what that means for each specific contract that comes through. Because remember, we have hundreds of contracts that we ask council for approval and move forward with.
Just before you do, just actually a correction. If it saves us $200,000 a year, that's actually, we only need 5% because the annual cost is about $100,000.
Correct.
Well, we still make our money back.
Yeah, Ms. Brenner, and then Mr. Donovan. Ms. Brenner first. Okay.
No, I think he had his hand up before.
No, you were first, yep.
Oh, okay, well, I think Tyler should make a motion of what he just said, so we can get started on getting the metrics that we need.
We have to dispose of this matter before we do anything else.
Yeah.
Well, but this, he can do an amendment as a motion, sure. He could make an amendment, do it.
So you should have called me first.
I was gonna do it, but I think you do it much more.
Mr. Donovan.
professionally to me.
I would like to dispose of this motion that I support, but I was trying to explain to the people following around here what we're talking about, and the 3 people watching on YouTube. Hi, Deb.
He's really at a meeting.
I mean, when you see stuff in these documents to say, like, it will become apparent, that can be really frustrating. But what this is 60% of Whatcom County voters approved this EMS levy to have a better, more efficient EMS system. And one of the ways to do that, what do we have? 13, 16 districts plus the city, and all having different ways that they collect data. And we're required by, to be able to qualify for state, federal grants, to have a better way to collect these data. So we put out a request for proposal. The vendor that, won this competitive bid process has this software. I think it'll make cost savings. I want to have, I kind of buy that it will, but that's almost a bonus, and that we got to do this anyway. We're going to get a vendor that's actually going to be saving us money potentially. So I think there's a separate issue that's really important that we come up with, like, how do we have metrics to measure things that are returning on investment? But this is we got to do it. It's going to cost $180 whatever something $1,000. It might save us that much money or more or less, but we got to do it anyway. And it's something that's going to make emergency medical services in this county work better. And I'm glad that it's going to save some money, but the fact that it's going to make emergency medical services in this county work better, that's what people voted for. And I'm going to support it.
Mrs. Brennan.
Tyler, maybe you could answer this. The city of Bellingham has been using this company.
Yeah.
So even if they haven't been keeping track of their metrics, isn't there some way we can either ask them or go through their finances and find out and find a kind of a starting point?
Yeah, the city of Bellingham Fire Department, it just implemented the image trend in January
they haven't done it.
of
They just started.
2018, this
Okay.
year. And there was a cost savings because we were able to piggyback off of their RFP and their purchasing process. So there was some efficiencies and some cost savings for the county to move forward and use their process to be able to acquire image trend. And in the future, we will be combining these contracts into one because it mostly is EMS purposes that Bellingham, they just move forward to accomplish it.
Do we have the ability in the future, if it's not cost effective, to change or do something different?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It was articulated earlier today that there's a notice clause that if it turns out that the cost is much more substantial than the benefits, which I highly doubt, but if it does, there's a process to indicate and go out to another process. I think the standard of return on investment for these types of systems are a very interesting question to get around to what is the actual value, and is it financial, or is there other valuable aspects to these types of contracts, social, on where it moves forward. And to try to define the investment and the value of that investment gets very complicated. We can spend all night to go further down in the weeds into that conversation. I get the conversation about return on investment from a financial aspect, especially if it's within our own Whatcom County and we're looking to make some cost savings to move forward. But the broader conversation of emergency medical services, like Councilmember Donovan indicated, the overall efficiencies that we're going to get, those are all very hard to define. Not only the patient care side of it. I don't even go there because I'm an administrator. I don't have the patient care side of it. But those are all very hard to define on how to where to go on return on investment.
Mr. Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support this 100%, but I do have one question. You mentioned that the city of Bellingham has already started using this. Does this 143,000, does that buy us into a partnership with Bellingham, and then when we renew next year, is it less? Or how does it work if we're gonna be operating with the city?
It's a good question. If you see in there's a $3.23 per call. That number is the call that Bellingham got through their RFP process. So we were able to use and have some cost savings just from a call standpoint on the annual ongoing maintenance. As we worked, if you remember, council, we had a first response contract that came to you 2 weeks ago. And through those conversations, we've also been coordinating with Bellingham on how these contracts will be blended together in the future. I don't have all the details today, but an example of where we have coordinated and where there has been cost savings is the pricing system that we had for the countywide system was based off a couple years ago, annual maintenance fees that Bellingham had negotiated.
Thank you.
So, Mr.
Chair.
Mr. Ballou, okay. Mr. Ballou, then Mr. Bird, then me.
I acknowledge the frustration of not being able to have a good projection of what the cost savings that this product could bring to the county and users, but I think that I'm more encouraged about the opportunity to have our EMS workers help patients and save lives, and I think that we can all agree that activities like that make the expense all that worthwhile, and that we'll have the chance over the next year, 3 years, but the length of the contract to determine if the cost savings is there, and also if the product helps the community enough to provide more and better services from our EMS workers.
Mr. Bird.
There's an argument for the saving lives piece, and the I guess I'm stuck with just this being the fact that I have to base things off data and not how I feel or what may occur. I mean, if I base things off of what may occur, then I'd have to ask Mr. Brown. I'm going to pick on you. Sorry. I know you'll take it in good heart. But I'd have to ask him to buy me a new Tesla because that's about $160,000, and it has this really cool new feature that autopilot. And I'm just positive that might save my life one day and prevent me from being in a car accident. And while I can't prove it, it'll become apparent after you buy it for me, I'm sure.
And you're still alive.
Right?
This is a bad example.
No, this is a great example. I love it, right? It's a bad example because it would be your money and it would be apparent, right?
Buy the Model 3, it's cheaper.
What I've been looking for on a couple accounts here is what you just did, Tyler. I mean, and that was pretty straightforward, and you did it on the fly. And this was a conversation we had 2 weeks ago in which it was about this and measurements. And at the end of the day, we'll never know what is successful and what is not successful until we put in place how we are going to judge that when the time comes. And it can't be done after the fact. It has to be done beforehand. And as long as this council continues, and I'm talking about measurements as far and the ROI, and there will be things that we can look at that we can't justify ROI on necessarily, but we should still put in place measurements so we can judge whether that was a successful program or not. And clear measurements based on data and not gut feeling and subjectivity, because how we all feel would be very, very different about something after the fact and when we look back on one hand. And on the second hand, I have to come back to the fact that this council still has to deal with a $100 million jail that we don't have money to build, with $250 million in capital expenses and improvements to facilities that we can't pay for, and a long list of other projects that we just don't have the money for. And whether it's this council, or whether it's what's happening in Olympia with our state, or whether it's what's happening on a national level, until we start being fiscally responsible and putting metrics in place, we'll continue to go down this road of throwing our money away on projects that don't necessarily matter, or we'll have no idea if they had an impact, and not spending the money on things where we have to be putting the money because they have to have an impact. And for me, we can start that today. This is a great spot. I think that's a great example of, for this specific project, of exactly what I was looking for. And this council we could put a motion together and ask and give directions to the staff for what we want to see in the future when it comes to spending. And I would be all for both, and hopefully we can do both tonight.
What colour Tesla?
I'll
I get a
second it.
choice? I'll take a dark
All right,
gray.
so let's not let that get out of hand. We had a robust discussion today on this particular issue, and I think you asked me the question, didn't I do cost-benefit analysis in my own business? And the answer is, I did it for large projects. I did it for projects where there was uncertainty about what the payback was going to be. I did it, frankly, with any project as much as I could where the payback looked like it was going to be greater than 12 months. I didn't always do a cost-benefit analysis because a cost-benefit analysis by itself costs money, and then to some degree you have to do a cost-benefit analysis on whether you do a cost-benefit analysis. Because, you know, it's particularly when the data is difficult to get. If we don't have the data, because we don't have a system that produces that data, the collection and production and analysis of that data can cost, in this case, it wouldn't surprise me if it could cost you $50,000 or $100,000 to do the job properly. I wouldn't do, and I also, the other areas where I didn't do a cost-benefit analysis, except I do it between options, I wouldn't do it on whether I did the project itself, is when there was a compliance issue involved. In other words, I had to do it. I had to solve the problem somehow, but I had to solve the problem. And in this particular case, it was pointed out to us that we're not NIMSIS 3 compliant, as I understand it at the moment. And we're required to be NIMSIS 3 compliant, which is the national EMS standard. I also want to say that when I looked at this initially, I could inherently see that we were going to save money. I could inherently see we were going to prevent the unnecessary loss of life, because in this country, the national standard of the published numbers is at least 100,000 people a year die from medication errors in hospitals. That's when they're in the hospital under 24-hour care, and they still die because of the error rate between them. So if we can reduce the error rate, if we can increase the response rate between the handoff, I see that as a payback. Now, having said all that, I support the principle of what you're trying to do. I just don't support it on this project. I think this one is a clear winner, and it's not wise to delay it any further. But in terms of holding the county government, holding the county council responsible for going through a cost-benefit analysis and working out what the ROI is and tracking what our key performance indicators should be and measuring our performance against what we did last year and what we do for similar jurisdictions of the same size, absolutely for that. And I would support that going forward. I just think this is the wrong project to focus on to start with. Mr. Bird.
This is going to go back and
Well,
forth, I can tell.
since everybody has said
Mr.
something, I have to say something too, so.
But
No, you really don't.
Mr. Sadhu, Mr. Bird was first, then you.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is probably my favorite conversation that I've had since being appointed, and it's because I feel like we're actually making some progress.
Yes, we
here.
are.
And so for me, like, that in itself is fantastic. I'm going to go back to, it could cost $100,000 to do a cost-benefit analysis, or it could be as straightforward as what Tyler just took the time to do today. I know that when I look at our business, and I'm going to go back because that's what I look at a lot of the time, and I'm going to give an example of that. We write a ton of RFPs and we run a ton of proposals. And what we sat down and did this year is I spent time with the person on my team that writes those. And we monitored her, and we basically measured exactly how much time it takes her to write a proposal. And then we went out and we looked at software and we said, okay, how much time will it take us to write a proposal with this software? And then we looked at the difference and we found that we could triple the number of proposals that we write if we implemented that software. And we could do something just as simple here. If someone took an hour to go out and spend and look at how much time does it take to fill out the form based on what we're doing today, and how much time would it take to input it into a database, and what's the difference, that's not going to cost us $50,000, but it's definitely in good faith for how we spend money for our taxpayers and our community. Or as simple as what Tyler just did a moment ago. I mean, that's what I was asking for. And I will change my vote to yes because of that and that information, because it's exactly what I was looking for. The fact that we can now save $100,000 given the information that we were able to calculate, I think that's a huge benefit. But I also have to look at, the hard part is the subjectivity for me. And when we're basing things off of subjectivity and not objectivity, it's always a guess. Unless you can point me to a case in Whatcom County where you can say, because of data problems, this person who died in an ambulance, there's no data. 100,000 people across the country somewhere where we don't even know what the cause was. It's still subjective at that point. So, and that could be a very objective data point if we had an example or two of what happened here locally due to this problem. I don't know because the information wasn't provided, but I would have been willing to take that as well as an actual example of why we had to have this solution. But at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is progress, and that's what I feel like we have right now is a conversation about how we could do this. And I'm wondering if we barter on this, and like if I vote yes, if you'll vote yes on the
I'll vote yes on it.
a motion. Just
No comment.
I will be very brief. I just wanted to bring the point. The nature of the government is such that if we say that we are going to distribute, say, vaccine, or health department comes in with a program we did the visiting nurse program, just to give you an example, where we provided help to young mothers with kids and who cannot afford certain things, and we put some money in. So there are extreme situations where you don't measure that, but this is a service you need to provide. We just approved $500,000 about half an hour ago to give it to the Opportunity Council for the affordable housing, right? Now, how do you do that, return on investment or measuring, when we are doing a program by nature? The program is such, we are providing certain element of help, and they spent $1.2 million over the last 6 or 7 years, and we are replenishing that with $500,000. So how do you do that? They were able to help so many people, and they got into homes, and we want to continue because they see the success that certain families are able to afford those houses, or they are able to pay the mitigation fees or service hookups for if they want to build a house in Linden and they're $5,000 for the hookups, this fund pays for that, right? For that particular family. So we may be helping only 70, 80 citizens by that process, right? So what I'm arriving at that as we agree with what you're asking for, it's a good thing to ask, but it's not possible. By nature, the government plans that now we're going to change this plan and it will be 5 years, like behavioral health. State government is come up with a plan. It will take 3 years to implement. And they are based on past experience. The managers came up with it. This is a better way to do that. Now, if we say that I want all my data and all the end results and this thing, how it will work, and before I release, say, 70, 80, or $100 million, we'll never do anything. No government, like we doesn't mean that council, but no legislature will do anything. Like fixing Hearst is a pig in the poke. They just, few people got agreed. Do you think that Hearst fix was thought through, that what its impacts will be? No, it's the thought through was people have issue, they want to build their homes, give them the relief. That was the outcome. And they put $300 million to that. Do you think that they need a cost-benefit analysis for $300 million before they put that fund in and send us the Hearst fix? No. I mean, I'm not really rejecting what you're asking, but I'm saying there are a variety of situations the government has to take decisions and put it to the public. That's what our job is. Of course, we have to use the money wisely. I'll just stop there.
Okay.
Mr. Bird?
For the example that you gave, I think that the EDI example of the 500,000, how would you measure that? I would start by looking at for every new house that's built, we get incremental tax revenue in addition to what we're already getting through the tax assessor's office. And we'd start there, and we'd say for every house that we build, if on average we're spending $14,000 to cover the cost of permitting, and we get for that house at an average value of $300,000, we're getting $6,000 in additional tax revenue a year, it will pay itself back in 2.5 years. And that would be the cost benefit analysis for that specific program. Now, I've been looking at the tiny homes program. Let's use that as an analogy, because I think it's kind of similar to what you were looking at with the nursing program. And one of the people that works for me pulled some stats for me on this. And so let's give that a whirl. So in Boston, took a housing first approach and reduced shelter demand by 24% and saved $2 million a year in state funds. Colorado, a coalition for homeless, they took a housing first approach with tiny houses, and they saw a 73% reduction in emergency services that totaled an emerging cost savings average of $31,500 per participant. I think that you can do this with most programs. The point is, government, until we hold ourselves accountable for doing it, we will never do it. And that's all I'm asking. Let's put it in place and ask the team, when possible, please bring this data. Do your best to give us this data. That's what I'm asking.
Ms. Brenner, Mr. Donovan.
Well, I just think we have a perfect example. I don't know if you were talking about them, but housing now, whatever. These are the guys who gave us a whole bunch of data, specific numbers of how they made money multiply and triple and all that. And I can't do the metrics thing, but I can understand what they're saying. And I do think it's very possible. I have to admit, I think when government does it, there's just these extra sometimes we should get rid of those extra costs, but there's so many different things in play that government has to do that private doesn't. And sometimes it's a really good deal when you've got somebody from the private sector being able to give us real specifics. I'm just real impressed with that. So I'm going to support that. I'm going to second your motion that you're going to make, and let's do it.
Mr. Donovan.
So I'm really interested in this and the next item on the agenda.
Well, we're going to
So I hardly ever do this, but I encourage Mr. Byrd, Mr. Dew, and Ms. Brenner and everybody to come up with this metric you want to give staff, and not here right now.
Why?
So I'm going to call the question.
Okay, you call that question, but.
Thank you, thank you.
What?
The question has been called with a second. All in favour say aye.
Aye. You should have done this 10 minutes
Opposed?
ago.
All right.
I thought you were good.
With respect, fellow council members, you could have all.
You call for the question, you can't keep talking.
All right, so now the motion is to approve this, and there was some discussion about you making an amendment, but I'm not sure that you.
It's got to be second.
When you call for the question.
Well, you haven't made a specific motion to amend. So just in terms of parliamentary procedure, we have a motion on the floor. If you're making a motion to amend this motion, then we can address it. If it's a separate motion entirely, it gets dealt with separately.
Yeah, I understand. I'm not making an amendment.
Okay,
You're
fine.
not?
Not to this. I think it has to be separate.
Yeah.
That is
No, I
totally
know.
separate. You're right.
It has to be separate.
Yeah, it has to be separate.
Yeah. Okay, so we are now voting on the main motion. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, okay.
And now we have another motion.
No, what we're going to do is we'll deal with the rest of the agenda.
Yeah, it will be other business. We have an item there.
We do this all the time, we change stuff, so.
Sorry.
They're even saying, please don't hurt us anymore. I know.
after watching this is why few people apply for a government service. For clarity for the audience, given all the thing, we have just voted to approve authorization for the county executive to enter into a contract between Whatcom County and Image Trade Inc. for software licenses, professional services, annual fees to implement a regional electronic patient care reporting software system for emergency medical services in the amount of $143,134.20. Okay.
I only took a minute.
All right. Next item up is from Public Works.
Okay, there was a resolution in Public Works setting Whatcom County's Veterans Assistance Program eligibility income standards, which means to increase the standards so you can help more veterans, simply said. And it passed as a recommendation from the Public Works Committee 3-0, and I so move.
There's been a motion.
Second that.
Mr. Donovan.
I just want to thank Liz Harmon Craig for the presentation.
You're here. Hi, I didn't see you.
Wait, that's why I called the question, because you can sit out there. But yeah, we had in committee this afternoon the presentation on this program to expand services for veterans living in Whatcom County, and it's not an ask to increase taxes, but to try to get more people into the program and using the services by changing the eligibility criteria, and I really appreciate the work on that.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Next item up is Executive Lau's requests appointment of one council members to serve on the Americans with Disabilities Act ADA Compliance Committee.
Move to confirm?
Who do we have nominating?
Oh, yeah, you gotta have somebody.
I nominate Councilmember Brenner.
Oh, wait.
When does it meet? No, you're not doing that to me till I know when it meets. I like the idea, but I want to know when it meets and where. Is it in who knows?
A couple of times a year.
A couple times a year up here in Whatcom County? Oh, what time of day?
You know, I served on the committee for a few years.
You really shouldn't be doing
you
this.
should be
You're
up at the
supposed to be up at the mic, but
Mr. Oliver?
I'll probably do it.
Steve Oliver, Whatcom County Treasurer. You know, I have served on this committee in the past, and, you know, I would say in my last 2-year term, I believe maybe we met 3 times.
It's not the amount of times, and I'm glad it's right there, but I just, what time, like morning, afternoon, evening?
Typically it was an afternoon meeting, maybe an hour,
I'll do
hour and
it.
a half.
You said the
in the
magic
HR
I'll
word.
blame him if it's wrong.
There was afternoon was the
Okay.
key word.
There's free cookies, right?
I would be good because
You would be good.
I am disabled.
So do we have any other nominations other than the esteemed Ms. Brenner?
Yeah. Oh.
Seeing none, all in favour of Ms. Brenner, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 7-0. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next item up is council appointments to boards and commissions and committees. The first one is an appointment to fill the vacancy on the Whatcom County Portage Bay Shellfish Protection Advisory Committee, partial term ending the 31st of January 2019. Or two.
I'm sorry, the ADA thing came next?
Oh, we just
finished that.
Oh, I thought.
Yeah, that's what
I'm sorry, okay.
I got appointed to.
Never mind.
It's been a long day. Oh, no, I'm actually on that committee too.
Right, are we?
Sorry.
The Veterans
Chair.
Affairs.
Just trying to throw you.
You did, okay. First up is an appointment to fill the vacancy in the Whatcom County Portage Bay Shellfish Protection District Advisory Committee, partial term ending either January 31st, 2019, or 2 partial terms ending January 31st, 2021. The applicant is Eleanor Hines.
I move approval.
Second.
Ms. Brenner moves approval and seconded by Mr. Buchanan. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously, and I'd like to recommend that we appoint it to one of the partial terms ending in 2021. Does that meet with the council's approval?
I like that idea.
All right.
Yep.
What's the difference?
There's 2 ending 19 and then
2021.
21, one ending 19.
Yep.
So longer term would be.
Yep.
So I make that as a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Mr. Donovan seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously, actually. Ms Hines is now appointed to the partial term ending in January 31st, 2021. Next item up is is the request confirmation of executives' appointments to boards, committees and commissions for the year 2018. And there are the Agricultural Advisory Committee, for which it is, I'm going to ask Mrs. Sadhu to pronounce this name.
Yes, I move to approve. I talked to this young man. He is a
He wants you to say his
second.
name.
Oh, Jagjeevan Barar.
Thank you.
Yes.
And Jeff Rennie.
Yes.
And Jeffrey.
He's a second generation Punjabi berry farmer, young man, born in London, graduated from there, went to university, and loves berry farming. So I encouraged him to get on the advisory committee, and he was hesitant. I said, we can help you, just get on there and learn and work with the community. So he agreed, and I'm pleased that he went and attended the last Ag Advisory Committee yesterday, I believe. So he was very pleased with that. Yep.
Move to confirm the appointments.
And I would just want to say, and Jeff Rainey is a longtime Foothills resident who's been active in all kinds of things, and I'm
Yep.
just really happy to see him committing to something like this. I haven't
Yep.
seen him in a while.
So I'm going to read the others, and then I'm going to ask for us to
Okay.
confirm all of them. And the next one was Developmental Disabilities Board,
Oh,
Megan Porter, and the Northwest Senior Services Board, Denise Iree.
I move approval.
So there's a
Of all.
motion, as a second.
Second. I thought he moved, but
Ms Brenner first, Mr Bird as the second.
Third.
All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
They are, all three are confirmed. And the next item up is, there is 4 items for introduction. Items
I'll move approval.
of all 4?
Yep.
Second.
There. Barry wants to go home.
Mr. Chair.
that's how you get one gold medal in the.
All right, so it's moved items 1 through 4, and I would just like to explain. Items 4 was for discussion, was going to be introduced at the next meeting, but I asked that it be introduced at this meeting because then it would coincide with a presentation from Rod Brown, not to be confused with myself, who's going to talk about the issue at the next council meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
All
I'd
right,
like to request that number 4 be pulled and voted separately.
we can do that. So
Second.
we'll vote items 1 through 3.
Oh, we don't have to do second.
To introduce, so all in favour, any further discussion on 1 through 3? Seeing none, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Mr Bird wants to discuss item 4, the introduction of item 4 separately.
Move to introduce item 4.
Mr Buchanan moves to introduce.
Second.
Is there a second?
I
Mr.
second
Sidhu
that.
seconds. Mr Bird, discussion.
I think we all know my position on these kind of things at this point. I have a big issue anytime we are going to introduce anything same day, let alone 2 o'clock before a meeting, and I can't approve that with such short-term notice when no one has any idea what's going on. So if we want to bring it up and get it on the agenda for next time, I'm okay with that, but I think public process is public process, and I just want to see it be worked.
This does move it and get on the agenda for next time.
Yeah.
Well,
That's the process of introduction.
The 2 o'clock thing, I think we'd have people here and talking about it, so that's where I stand.
Ms Brenner.
Well, and I didn't vote to hire this guy in the first place, so I'm going to do a protest vote and vote no. I don't want to hear any more about it.
So just so we're clear on the process here.
I understand the process.
This,
I
but you've raised the
understand.
question for the audience, and I want to make sure
Okay,
the audience is clear. We are not moving to vote on this tonight. We are simply voting to introduce this, and then this will be visible to people people will know this is coming in 2 weeks, and in 1 week, it will show up on the council agenda, and then there will be a public hearing before we vote on this. So it's about as transparent as I think we can get. Again, the reason for doing this is that Rod Brown, who is the lawyer who was hired by the council to talk about the council's options on this issue is going to present on that same night. And I believe it is beneficial for the audience who is concerned about this issue to have the convenience of hearing from him at the same time before we vote on it. So that's the timing for me.
Can I chime in?
Mr. Burt.
Okay. Just, Mr. Brown that was a great take on your perspective on it. So for clarity on my perspective, this is the agenda that goes out on Thursdays. This goes out and is posted to our website and is issued to our community so everyone knows what will be discussed in these meetings. On this agenda is not this moratorium. This moratorium has 2 more months before it expires. There's absolutely no reason that we have to put this on the same day that we come into a meeting. This was sitting on my desk when I came back from a committee meeting at 3:30 today, right before having to go to dinner and then come right back here. So for me, there's absolutely no rush. What the public has asked for is process in which they get to see this on this agenda with plenty of time 2 times. Once to be introduced and then once to be discussed and voted on. And for me, I think we do public process the way that the public has asked, and we vote next time when it's on this agenda in plenty of time per the requests or expectations.
Mr. Donovan.
We're talking about an introduction item?
Yes.
Right? Yep. Okay, so it's an introduction item. I mean, I shared some of these concerns, and I think I voiced them
on her
2 weeks ago when nobody cared.
You did?
Yes.
Yeah, I did. Nobody cared then. But, and that was not an introduction item even, so.
Oh, well, that's because I just didn't want it.
You know, but this is an introduction item. This is even different than that. We're not acting on it today. We're acting on it in 2 weeks. And I don't know what the urgency, well, I'm just saying. It's an introduction item, which means
Okay.
it'll be 2 weeks from now. So. And I even voted on the introduction item on the Hearst thing, not that I was going to support it.
You want to call the question?
What else did you do? Tell us everything.
Madam Clerk has just pointed out to me, we, in order to give everybody an adequate time to participate in this process at the next council meeting, both to hear the presentation from Rod Brown from Cascadia Law Group. I wish he had a different name.
How many times?
The request was that we start the next council meeting at 6 p.m. Does that meet with favour of the rest of the council?
Yes.
So there's consensus on that?
Yeah, I like that. I actually gave my response already that I'm okay with 6 o'clock, starting at 6.
Right. And then, Madam Clerk, can I just ask for your confirmation? If we introduce this tonight for a vote in 2 weeks, is that compliant with Whatcom County Code?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Mr.
Yeah,
Donovan.
there's not consensus.
But I'm actually, we introduce it, we may or may not vote on it in 2 weeks. We
could always delay it if that's the choice of the council.
Yeah.
All right.
Just
Any
to
further
clarify-
discussion on introducing this item?
I just want to clarify that we will have a public hearing on this in 2 weeks.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Right, in compliance with the county code. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favour of introducing this for discussion and a public hearing in 2 weeks, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
So that's 5 yes and 2 no, okay. All right, committee reports. The Committee of the Whole met today and we discussed the ordinance that we have already voted on this morning, which was the water ordinance, voted on this evening, which is the water ordinance, and we also discussed the changes to the structure of the Whatcom County Code, which we have held in committee. Finance, was there any other?
Yes, we had a briefing from Deputy Executive Tyler Schroeder about the truck road because of the flood situation and the declaration of emergency, and which is still continuing. Other than that, we have voted on all the rest of the items.
Public Works and Health?
Okay, We had a quarterly report from Whatcom County Public Works Director John Hutchings, and ta-da-ta-da, we had the most wonderful update from Homes Now on volunteer efforts to provide homes and shelter for the homeless in Whatcom County. And I have to say, these guys are the most inspirational people I've met in a long, long time. So we got to make it work, Tyler. We did.
Pressure is on.
We did did we do we recommended doing it. The committee recommended doing a motion to Deputy Executive Tyler Schroeder and the rest of the administration to come up with ways to make this work as soon as possible. I don't know what the wording was originally, but that's what we meant.
That's your motion?
That's my
No, it's already
motion.
been passed.
That's a good
Yes, sir.
motion.
Thank you.
No, but that was a
Very
motion.
like-
No, but that was a motion in committee. Do you want it do you want it passed by the full council?
Oh, yeah, that's a good
Yes,
point.
we made it in committee to recommend
Okay,
to the full
So that's a
council.
motion for which does not need a second. Any discussion on that motion?
Second, third,
For-
Tyler.
And
Oh,
Jill had it written down earlier.
ASAP.
Madam Clerk, are you clear on the motion?
The
Yes,
one
she's
from this
nodding yes.
afternoon.
Okay.
They get it.
No further, any further, Mr. Schroeder?
Tyler Schroeder, Deputy Executive. The only other piece of information to the motion I would make is that report and dialogue would happen at the Homeless Solutions Work Group, and then it could come back to the council as
Okay.
appropriate.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's fair.
ASAP.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously.
See, you guys just get me so excited.
And I thought you were here for EMS. But anyway.
And they waited through this whole crazy meeting.
All right.
Oh, my God. Oh.
Well, thank you for that. So moving on, planning
We're
and
almost
development did
done.
not meet today.
Yeah, we
Huh?
had that
What?
fringe sub-area.
Sure, please.
We met to and listened to a presentation on, let's see here, the urban fringe and an update to the comprehensive plan and the urban fringe sub-area plan. And so no motions made, but just information as far as what's going on and what the future process will be.
And there'll be a hearing.
And there will be a hearing for it.
That wasn't added to the agenda, so I missed it.
I know. I almost missed it too.
Well, it was
All right.
a revision. It
got
was a
slipped in there.
revision. I came up late.
Other items. Mr. Spurd.
All right, now I get to make my separate motion,
Make
right?
the
So
motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we.
Tyler, you want to hear this?
No, he doesn't.
That Tyler.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I had it written down. I'd like to make a motion that we're probably gonna have to wordsmith this, but
That's why he's
require
gonna
staff on budget request staff on budget requests to include a cost benefit or break-even analysis, as well as clear measurements and benchmarks for those measurements and review time periods. At what point those measurements will be reflected upon and determined whether they were successful or not.
I second.
I have
Mr. Sadoo.
a discussion point. I like the resolution, but it is very blanket and covers everything. I think there are some exceptions. And like, to me, EMS itself was just passed the levy last year. We just organized 13 districts into one district, and the first time the organization is working to get themselves organized. And in certain cases, your resolution may not be exactly followed, so there should be some room where possible, or in most cases, something like that. Because, otherwise we are, setting something and saying something and not really following ourselves. It's not a good thing, but I like this spirit and where we are going with this. But bind ourselves blanketly, everything coming to budget request is a very over the year, you'll see that we deal with many, many things. And I'm just showing a word of caution that what we are saying, we should be able to achieve that.
Mr. Byrd and then Ms. Brenner.
So as far as the example with EMS, I appreciate what you're saying, but this is what I know from experience. If I hire someone new and they come in and I don't set an expectation for them, then getting them to actually change their habits to come to an expectation later is very difficult, if not impossible. But if I set an expectation in the beginning, when they're first hired and first come on board, then it's much easier to get them to actually accept those expectations and move forward with them. And so, especially in this case, after we've approved such an enormous lump sum of additional tax revenue that's coming into this, I think we should absolutely set an expectation for the individuals who are putting forth financial matters or financial suggestions for how we spend that money. But with that said, I am open to a friendly amendment on this to make it more clear, but I'm hoping that we can do something here tonight.
Ms. Brenner, then Mr. Donovan.
Could you guys read the motion? I actually thought you were pretty flexible in your motion, but maybe I'm wrong.
I hope I got it all. The motion is to request that staff include cost benefit and clear measurements and benchmarks on budget requests, and to review time periods when the benchmarks will be reviewed and determined successful or not.
I think it is as much as possible. You want to do a friendly amendment as much as possible? I don't know. I like it the way it is.
Oh, say again, is it my turn?
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
Donovan.
You did the head nod. I appreciate the goal here, but I think this is something that would take a lot more time than just drafting a motion here right now, because we're talking about the law regarding budget requests, contracts for services, contracts for personnel, purchasing. It's probably going to get into what the charter says we can do, what state law says we do. But I think this takes committee hearings, or this takes like council members kind of banging heads together and thinking about what they want.
This is just a request, and Tyler already knows what we're talking about. You don't?
Let the record show he's shaking his head like this.
Mr. Schroeder.
Tyler Schroeder, Deputy Executive. I understand the intent from Councilmember Byrd and the understanding, but I also know from management perspective that firm expectations have to be fully defined before they're be carried out. And so to Councilmember Donovan's perspective, I think it should take some time in Finance Committee to get a good understanding of what cost benefit is, how those contracts would be looked at, or what the asks and answers would be. And so if Finance wants to take on this conversation as well as maybe the EDI conversation in committee meetings, then I think that'd be a good kind of next steps forward. I have hesitation with just a blanket requirement for every contract that comes forward from now and into the future without fully understanding what those expectations are. Because I will have to be the one to explain to 800 employees that do the contract development, the work, and the understanding of those forms, what exactly the intent of the council is. And I won't be able to do that just from that motion today. So that, my friendly amendment, even though I can't do it, would be to take that conversation to the Finance Committee meeting and flush out the details to what the motion is and what the background is, to see how best we can incorporate that question into the purchasing policies and into the background and details that we have.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Brenner.
Okay, and if Finance doesn't want it, you can put it in my committee. It takes everything, so. It'll be in some point.
Okay.
Well, it's true.
Just to clarify something Mr. Donovan said, this is a budget request right here, a supplemental budget request, okay? On this request, there are two fields, cost savings and measurements. What I am asking is the two fields that are already on this form be filled out when they're submitted with data that gives us objective measurements for what we will be looking at. They wouldn't be here, I don't believe, we can't do them for some state reason or for some regulatory reason. No, that was not towards you, Tyler.
It was for
It was
this
just,
guy.
so, with that said, I'm willing, would you accept this onto, wait,
You're in finance.
I am on finance, but, it's either gotta be me and you, or it's gotta be me
No,
and you.
I will
or-
accept that challenge in the way that we should bring it out in discussion and find out certain ways. And another thing is that sometimes we should walk before we run, and maybe let's do that in certain items and see how successful we are and how they are, because behind the scenes, we come here every 2 weeks for one day, but behind the scenes, there's a lot of people who get involved and informed and trained, and we should be conscious of that how this process would work. I mean, in principle or intent, I totally agree, but coming day one and say blanket that we're going to do all this, maybe let's pick out, have a discussion and pick out certain things and see how it's working. Let's see what their experience is, what our experience is, and then once we are able to do that, and then expand that to more items. I just want to have a cautious approach rather than just put it in the wording and put it in there and then have frustration. Every item, we will have frustration in them and in us. I don't think that's a good solution.
Mr. Zeppel.
Sorry, Ms. Brenner and then Mr. Bird.
Well, actually, I don't think that, my frustration is that it wasn't already done. And you're scaring me when you say, well, let's be real cautious how we go. Seems like we can start somewhere and get something started really quick and not have to have every single thing done. We're not going to be able to build on anything if we don't start with something. And I just want to see it started.
Mr. Bird.
I'm willing to withdraw the motion if you're willing to put it on the finance committee for next Tuesday or whatever the next, or at our next finance committee to come up with an option then.
I agree, and I would request clerk that please put as an agenda item for discussion on the Finance Administration Committee for next meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I will withdraw my motion.
So I just want to be clear. I know the motion's withdrawn, but I wanted to give everybody else a chance to speak first. I support the principle, absolutely support the principle, and when I was first on the council, one of the things that I really wanted to pursue was finding the funding for us to identify and measure key performance indicators. Coming back to a couple of your examples, yes, I certainly would agree that you want to give clear instruction to your employees when you hire them. I tend to do it in writing by sitting down first and really thinking clearly what I want them to do rather than doing it on the fly. And so it's not that I object with your goal. I think your goal is laudable. I think the process can be improved, and the right process is to draft something up in writing and then us use that as a discussion for the template for in finance. And you've got to be careful about what you ask for, because the thing I've learnt inside of operating inside of the government is, for the most part, the staff are very respectful of the decisions of the council. I don't want to give them guidance that makes them think they've got to come up with an ROI before they go and get a new pencil from the stationery cupboard, right? There's a point where the cost of doing the ROI is greater than the benefit of doing the ROI. So let's go through this in writing, let's work out what the threshold is. And the other thing, and I don't need to do an ROI study to know this, or a cost-benefit analysis, is we'll get the best ROI, the best return, by focusing on the big items first that we have the most control over. So, any further discussion on this item? All right. Is there any council member updates?
Yeah.
Mr. Buchanan.
I spoke a little bit about this afternoon, but I wanted to reiterate it for the public that's watching. I traveled down to Seattle with Homes Now on last Thursday, and we went to Tent City number 5, which is a tiny home community. And I was just super impressed with the cleanliness, the orderly fashion in which everyone conducts their business, and how polite everyone was, how knowledgeable they were about what they were doing, and they're self-governed. The homeless folks that live there run that village, and they run it very, very efficiently. And I also want to reiterate what I said today earlier too, which is we are so fortunate in this community to have Homes Now working hard. They're getting labor, they're getting all kinds of things for this project that we don't see that often with folks that come to us with projects. So my hat's off to you, and I'm just thrilled that we're going to work together and make this happen. So again, thanks for being here tonight.
Mr. Ballou, anything?
Nothing for the good of the order.
Mr. Burt?
No, thank you.
I have nothing. Ms. Brenner?
Just that, I want to say again that Councilmember Byrd and I went out to the Tiny Homes Project on Lummi, and that's real close. I hope everybody gets a chance to go see that. And I would like to go see the one in Seattle sometime, so.
We'll set it up for them. Can I ask a question, or am I not allowed?
I think under the circumstances we'll allow it, please, but use the microphone.
Yeah, we're talking about you. You might as well come on.
Jim Peterson, President Homes Now. Just to clarify on the motion that was passed, so we know where we're at, what is the next step for us? What do we need to provide Tyler? Because we can provide him with statistics of how other Denver, Seattle, Salt Lake, Yakima, Spokane, Vancouver, Portland, all these cities all across the nation. We need to know what is our next step. What do we need to provide more? How long of time are we waiting?
He's here right now. Before you leave, you give him your phone number and your email
I
address.
gave him a card earlier today.
Okay.
I was just curious about the next process. Is this like, now we wait for 2 or 3 months, or?
But it's on us now.
My builder kind of wanted to know that also. Like,
Yeah.
when are we going to do this project?
So Tyler Schroeder, Deputy Executive, if your builder is just finishing up buildings, I want to just caution everybody about time frame and next steps. So I know that we're excited about what the motion was and where that was all going, but to think that that'll happen within the next couple of weeks or where that goes, I just want to caution that.
No, we're looking at April, end of April.
So how I envision next steps, Mary Dumas, who's the facilitator of the Homeless Solution Work Group, is here today. And so after the council passed the motion, we had a very brief discussion about looking at the exact language from the motion tomorrow after the record comes out and putting an agenda item on the Solutions Work Group to have some further discussions about some interim steps on how to accomplish projects similar to the Homes Now projects, probably in either Whatcom County or the city of Bellingham. I know there's been conversations over at the city of Bellingham. I think they've actually passed an emergency ordinance to allow for some tent encampments. It may not be Homes Now. I don't know all of those details, but I do know that they're looking forward to some steps about housing solutions like this. And so that Homeless Solutions Work Group, next meeting is February 22nd. And so my understanding is there'd be an agenda item to have some additional discussions about what this would look like, because that group was already going to talk about interim solutions before a longer-term homeless shelter. So that's where I was going to take it. We were going to be ready to give some background on land use and zoning and building and life safeties in Whatcom County, similar to what we talked about today. So we'll do some research before here and there for that conversation. I believe Bellingham probably already has some information associated with it and what steps they could do. And then we'll see where it goes from there. So that was
Where and when on the 22nd?
the Homeless Strategies Work Group meeting is at 1:30 at the Mayor's Boardroom in City Hall.
So for the benefit of just to make sure the expectations are not overstated, the county has very little actual property, certainly very little that's vacant. The majority of the vacant land, I think it's 99% of the vacant land, excluding the National Forest, is in private hands. So
Parkland.
But you need sewer
Lots
and
of it.
water.
So then the second part of that is, of the land that we do have, the principal concern would be the disposal of human waste. Right, because we can't create a situation where we create a health hazard through through disease, through unsanitary processing of human waste. So this is not, there is not, we don't have a list of properties we can say, hey, pick one of these three.
No.
They just don't exist. So it's navigating through those challenges. It's particularly difficult. So, Ms. Brenner.
I respectfully disagree. We have lots of land, and we actually have houses on some of the parkland. I mean, they're used for different things. One of them is used as a rental, or I don't even know if the guy pays, the guy who manages the park there. So it's not like this is unheard of. And I'm not saying we should do it on parkland. I'm just saying we have plenty of options.
Right. But also, to be fair, a lot of the land or the opportunities you're talking about are in areas that are not on bus routes, and they're quite a ways out of the county. And
some aren't.
And some are, well, okay, but we'll have to go through that inventory, but there's not we don't have an inventory of readily available close-in property.
We understand that
Yeah.
you don't have tons of land.
So,
We absolutely have.
Mr. Bird.
Tyler, for that work group, it would be nice if what the county could bring forward is solutions for how we might be able to overcome some of these things. Even if, for whatever reason, you found that the county didn't have land available, I think it's important that we still look at what options we have when it comes to building and how we can help the situation, because there may be options out there where there's private property owners who would still be willing to do this, that had suitable land, and regardless, I think we need to bring some solutions to this.
Yeah, so the framework that I was thinking about bringing forward, I did some quick research this afternoon in regards to Bellingham's emergency ordinance, how the city of Seattle was able to accomplish the 1075 and some other ones that they've done. They did an ordinance in 2015. And I believe Everett or Snohomish also has an example. And so those are examples in which, from a policy decision, council could take some steps to allow for emergency encampment facilities on certain types of properties. There is a whole host of other issues that I want to talk about, or I don't want to talk about, that I think council should understand before you go through that. But that would be like the solutions that I was anticipating in bringing forward, is looking at how other jurisdictions have accomplished this same or similar type of action, what framework, what ordinance had to accomplish, and how those steps were moving forward, so that council can take that into consideration if they want to move on something very similar.
This sounds like a great start. Thank you.
I'd also like to add, I'm supportive of the county purchasing or leasing suitable land if we don't have stuff in inventory. So,
Wow. Wow.
So I don't, yeah.
Really?
Ms. Brenner.
What size property, and what's the smallest size you
The
could?
minimum from the 6 tiny home pilot project is just phase 1. Phase 2 would be, because we're building the service building big enough to support 6 more, to have 12 on one property. Talking to our builder and our contractor, he says we need a minimum of about an acre. It would be better if we had 2 acres, because we were going to put a community garden. Even with an acre, we could still put a community garden. We're talking about a little park for the people, like have a fire pit and barbecue grill where they can sit around. A way for them to get around and be a community and be able to sit around and just talk, like a little park. We're talking a little park, 9 people. It's not something big. So he said we could get away with 3/4 of an acre, but then when we add the community garden and we add a little park, then we get into, we're worried about zoning issues, crowdiness, how many people can be on how much land?
Well, I just had an idea. We own that property in Ferndale. I don't think doing something like this would interfere if it's ever even gonna, we're ever gonna move ahead on the jail, which is gonna be forever happening, we could at least do that. That's got power and everything.
I made that suggestion, I don't know whether it was to Barry or one of you. I made the suggestion, you got all this land in Ferndale.
Oh,
for
you
the
already
jail.
did? Okay,
I
yeah.
said, well, my solution for the shelter, building the shelter, was sell the land and build a shelter, but.
No, keep the land and build the tiny homes.
Well, that works better, but then you get into the environmental issues that we heard, isn't some of that wetland?
Well, yeah, but you're talking about tiny homes. We were gonna put a whole jail there.
Oh, yeah.
So that's gonna be a lot tinier than that would have been.
So
We do have and it's got services.
It does have water and sewer on it?
I'm pretty, doesn't it?
No.
I thought it's in Ferndale.
Ferndale has water.
Yeah. And sewer.
Yeah, the city of Ferndale has water and sewer in a close proximity
Yeah,
to
it's
the
not to the
Bounty Road
property.
jail facility site. It is not directly accessed, and there was a large cost to the extension. How it would relate to this type of project, I don't know, and I don't want to speak to it.
Oh,
Yes.
okay,
For the
I'll
jail
talk-
facility, there was some extension
They're nice
costs
in Ferndale, I'll
associated
talk to them.
Yeah.
However, the idea of city locations instead of unincorporated Whatcom County locations is a good thing from a policy standpoint to look
Yes.
at. So just
I
keep that
agree.
in mind as we move forward, as council moves forward with this conversation.
Well, we keep saying Bellingham, maybe we should talk
I-
to Ferndale. They seem a little, they're pretty open to stuff like this. They're not?
I think we have a,
Mr. Schroeder's trying to call the question.
I was gonna say, we have
What's
a
the joke?
appointed group of people just to solve this problem or work on it. Let them take care of it rather than us trying to find a solution right now. And it's going to the right committee, and Mr. Buchanan is right here. And let it take its own little process. We can't solve it tonight.
I guess I just gotta be honest.
No,
We've been working with the city, trying to work with the city since June, and my fear is, once the city gets involved, they're gonna shut us down because they don't like homes now. That's just being totally honest. That's just how I feel as what we've done with the city, how we've tried to work with the city, and how they've shut us down. So my fear is, once the city gets involved, they're gonna shut us down. That's just how I feel. And I could be totally wrong, but that's just the read I get.
Yeah.
So the impression I have from the city officials is that they do want to help solve this problem, so I wouldn't,
Yeah.
I don't share you, I perhaps do not understand your concern on the relationship with the city. I don't share it at this point. So I'm hopeful. Ms. Brennan?
Well, Barry's on that committee too, and Barry is gonna push this forward as fast as possible. Okay, so Barry's gonna,
It's just a concern I have,
But
because it's
he
been
doesn't
a
have your
contentious relationship with the city, and
I know. When we get cheered and all for doing the little that we're doing just to try to do this, there must have been something that didn't happen with the city. Because, I don't know what it is.
pretty much was, they never, you guys have asked us questions, you've asked us good questions. The city never did. And they never had us present to a committee. They just kept telling us as we were in the room talking to them, we're looking for a nonprofit to work with us. And me and Doug were saying over and over, we're sitting right here, and what's
You're a
wrong?
nonprofit.
Yeah, we are a total nonprofit.
Yeah.
We've got our letters and everything. But when we were in the meetings with them, they would tell us, we're looking for a nonprofit to work for us. And me and Doug would go, what are we? So that's where I have my concern. So I'm just gonna stop.
Yeah.
But
So we're in council member updates.
Oh,
This is a little out of sequence.
I think.
Yeah, but the whole evening's been out of
I just
sequence.
want to say the main sticking point with the
Your
city.
name first, Doug.
Oh, yeah, Doug Gustafson, Technical Director, Homes Now. The main sticking point we had with the city was that they specifically told us that the nonprofit had to be religious. So
Had to be religious?
Had to be religious, yeah. So like their
Really?
zoning allowed for different like exceptions if you were a religious nonprofit. So that's why they have all kinds of working relationships with the mission and stuff, because they're a religious nonprofit. And so that's and that's why last night they got the head of the mission to come forward and say that solving homelessness is rocket science. That's what he said. He said that solving homelessness is rocket science. And we specifically have for months said it's not rocket science. You just build houses, people can live in them, and then you deal with the other problems once they're housed and they're more stable. And then they specifically said that you can look back at the video if you want. They specifically said that solving homelessness is rocket science, and it's super hard and super complicated.
Have any of them ever been out to Lummi to see them?
Okay,
No.
I think we
So
should.
I would, just for
I was
clarity.
going to call question that let's just,
But
this
all
is
I'm
not
saying-
solving the problem.
I know.
I totally appreciate.
No, I'm not trying to confront anybody.
No,
I'm just
I
saying that
think
when I
it's
talk to
enough
the
said.
city-
We understand.
Okay.
But
No, I'm going to cut you off, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm going to cut you off. This is not an
Yeah.
open public session.
Okay.
So-
I'm just trying to explain what the context of what
Okay.
we're encountering.
You guys
And
brought
we
it
said
up
we're
about-
glad to help. We really want to help. We're just not religious.
Okay.
And it was a problem. So just FYI.
Okay. I will, as a point of clarification, point out that I think the reason for the city's question on the religious characteristic is because of a state law exemption that allows for encampments on religious properties only. So that's where I think the origin of that came from.
What do you have to get to be religious?
You'll have to look at the state court. Anyway, we're at council member
Okay,
updates. Mr.
I
Sadhu, do
think
you have any
we'll
updates?
stop this because every organization like city, they have their own reasons and they may not be suitable to your liking, but it's not that yeah, exactly.
Okay,
So,
you know what?
so let's
I'm
let's
sorry,
get
we're
on.
not-
Since we are on this topic, I'll do the member update. I think I'm the last one to do that, right?
Any other member updates?
So in the spirit of Homes Now, I think that end of January, we had a request in early January to help the Homes Now as well as the homeless people. So I organized with the Sikh temple up in Linden. We had 2 pickup loads of warm clothing, jackets, blankets, all kinds of material, and we brought food and served 300 people. And we promised that Homes Now that for 2018, every month, we will serve food to as many people, maybe 500 people. Once a month, we will do that for every month for 2018. And in a small way that we can help. And same thing is that we all share your feelings and we want to solve this problem and help in the process. So.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Sorry. Respectfully, you're not helping your position by interrupting. Right? You're just not. No, I'm sorry. Is there any further business for the council?
No.
Then we are adjourned. Thank you.